Chapter 32:30. 15 minutes later, Lin Sun and Baya Divine Lord were both injured, but their fighting spirit and strength seemed to be ignited. They were boiling as the battle turned more intense. The expressions of the enemies changed uncertainly. The expressions of those in Travel Sword Gorge turned tense as well. Those who had no grudges held their breaths and focused on the battle. They could not calm their hearts. On the other hand, Du Feng and Fa Wuxiang's mood gradually became more relaxed. If Lin Sun and Baya Divine Lord were both injured, it would undoubtedly be a good thing for them. At the very least, they would be able to gain an advantage in the final battle. Of course, that was under the premise that one of them emerged victorious. 15 minutes later, Baya Divine Lord suddenly retracted his hand and turned to leave the battlefield. Everyone was taken aback. Even Lin Sun himself was surprised. Save your stamina for the final battle. After Baya Divine Lord said that, he sat cross-legged outside the battlefield. He closed his eyes and began cultivating. His expression was calm and emotionless. Only then did people react. They could not help but exchange looks. Baya, you previously said that you would not show mercy. Why are you taking the initiative to concede now? Qi Qinji could not help but ask. Baya Divine Lord's eyes were closed as he said, I will be the loser at the end of the battle. If that's the case, why not end this battle earlier? Everyone could not help but be surprised. No one expected that the reason Baya had conceded was because he realized that he would definitely lose if he continued fighting. Is that really the case? Iwuin could not help but ask. Baya Divine Lord suddenly let out a long sigh. I know that all of you have your own thoughts. You think that I am helping Lin Sun, but I can only say that all of you are overthinking things. At that point, he did not say another word. As for the way everyone looked at Lin Sun, it became increasingly subtle. Even a top figure like Baya Divine Lord had admitted defeat. It was obvious how heaven-defying Lin Sun's present combat strength was. Thank you for letting me win. Lin Sun cupped his hands at Baya Divine Lord. Without another word, he left the battlefield and sat down on the ground. He did his best to recover from his injuries. Travel Sword Gorge and the others heaved a sigh of relief. And those old monsters who hated Lin Sun became more and more depressed. Lin Sun had only been at the Boundless Realm for decades. There was still room for improvement in the future. Yet, he could make a pinnacle figure like White Horizon Divine Lord take the initiative to admit defeat. Just the thought of it left one's heart palpitating. Next was the battle between Du Feng and Fa Wuxiang. This battle only lasted for less than a quarter of an hour. Du Feng took the initiative to admit defeat, allowing Fa Wuxiang to win this battle easily. When they saw this scene, the faces of the traversing Sword Gorge's group sank. Du Feng's action seemed like he was sacrificing his qualification to compete in the last battle, but in fact he was planning to kill with a borrowed knife. He not only avoided a life-and-death fight with Lin Sun in the last battle, but also used the power of the formless law to deal with Lin Sun, which was killing two birds with one stone. On the other hand, all he'd lost was merely a chance to compete for the Life Lotus Dao altar. Du Feng, what you're doing is dishonorable. Qi Qinji sighed. At this moment, who could not see through Du Feng's thoughts? When we do things, we act according to the circumstances. Since I'm doing this, I must have my reasons. How is it honorable or not? Du Feng looked solemn. He ignored the strange looks from the surroundings and said, Besides, if White Horizon Divine Lord can take the initiative to admit defeat, why can't I? This sentence was targeted at Du Feng. In fact, it was White Horizon Divine Lord's initiative to admit defeat that made Du Feng change his mind. Speaking of which, he was even somewhat dissatisfied with White Horizon Divine Lord. White Horizon Divine Lord's preemptive withdrawal was equivalent to Lin Sun preserving a lot of his strength. Under such circumstances, he was bound to expend a lot of his strength to fight with Fa Wuxiang to the end. Even if he could win in the end, he would definitely be at a disadvantage in the battle with Lin Sun. Since that was the case, he might as well give up decisively. This would also allow Fa Wuxiang to preserve more strength to deal with Lin Sun. This was also considered advancing by retreating. Now, all of you are quite scheming. Not far away, Tian Xingzi laughed sarcastically. Du Feng remained silent. The atmosphere became oppressive and strange. Due to Lin Sun's existence, many unexpected variables had appeared in the Great Tao contest today. The most unlucky one was Jiang Mingxue. He had encountered Lin Sun directly and was killed on the spot. Apart from him, Wang Xinghai and Du Feng had taken the initiative to avoid Lin Sun. Although it seemed dishonorable, everyone knew that they did not do so out of fear. It was because of the change in the situation that made them make a decision that was most beneficial to them. As for who would eventually occupy the Fate Lotus Tao altar, it was clearly not within Wang Xinghai's and Du Feng's consideration. In fact, as old monsters who had lived for many eras, they had experienced countless battles in the Fate Lotus world. If they wanted to head to the ruins of Wonders of Tao, they had many opportunities to do so in the past. Therefore, choosing to give up this time was not considered a loss. Lin Sun could obviously tell that Du Feng was retreating. However, he did not mind it. This was because even if he managed to obtain the Fate Lotus Tao altar, he would not leave just like that. He still had time to deal with his enemies one by one. Next is the final battle. Lin Sun, Fa Wuxiang, you may begin. Qinji said. Lin Sun stood up. However, before he could enter the battlefield, Fa Wuxiang, who was not far away, spoke. There's no need to fight. I will withdraw from this final battle. Fa Wuxiang was dressed in a purple robe. His forehead was bright and clean, and he was extraordinarily handsome. The moment he spoke, everyone present was caught off guard. This was yet another variable. No one had expected that Fa Wuxiang, who had not lost much of his cultivation, would give up a chance to compete for the Fate Lotus Tao altar. You are all scheming against me, and I do not want to be the knife that kills. Fa Wuxiang spoke casually. As he spoke, he looked at Du Feng in the distance. Old monk, your previous actions were indeed dishonorable. At the end of his words, there was a tinge of coldness in his tone. Du Feng wanted to use someone else's knife to kill, but he had to ask if Fa Wuxiang was willing to do so. Du Feng's solemn face turned gloomy. After a while, he said, Brother, you have misunderstood. It doesn't matter whether it's a misunderstanding or not. At least, such a battle of the Great Path makes me uncomfortable, Fa Wuxiang said coldly. I only hope that the next battle of the Fate Lotus world will not be like today, where you have to scheme for everything. It's disgusting. Du Feng's face changed again. What Fa Wuxiang said was too impolite. Everyone around was unable to calm down. There were too many variables in today's battle of the Great Path. It was neither exciting nor exciting, so the atmosphere had changed. All right, today's battle has come to an end. Congratulations, my young friend Lin. As Qinji spoke, he smiled and cupped his hands at Lin Sun. Many old monsters present also congratulated him, such as Tian Xingzi, Yi Wuyin, Baya Immortal, and so on. Of course, those who hated Lin Sun were all gloomy. Thank you, everyone. Lin Sun cupped his hands. He did not expect victory to come so suddenly, and he became the final winner. At this moment, looking at the old monsters present, Lin Sun understood many things. His easy victory was not because of how strong he was, nor because of how weak his enemies were. At the end of the day, it was because of the big shots like Qinji, Tian Xingzi, and Baya Immortal. It was because of them that the Battle of the Great Path was full of variables, allowing Lin Sun to gain a huge advantage in the end. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun recalled Baya Immortal's admission of defeat. He sensed something different. This was because these variables had appeared after Baya's admission of defeat. Lin Sun could not help but feel that Baya Immortal had done so to help him so that he could win easily. I have to have a good chat with Baya Immortal in the future. Lin Sun thought to himself, Seniors, please head to the Fate Lotus Taoist altar. Next, Lin Sun came to Mo Bei's, Mu Chongyun, and Xiaohe's side and spoke with a smile. Previously, he had agreed with Xing Jiangorge and the rest that if they could seize the Fate Lotus Taoist altar, they would send Mo Bei's and the rest to the ruins of wonders. Mo Bei's and the rest were clearly in a daze, as though it was unreal. After a while, Xing Gorge and Mountain Wind Pathmaster urged them to set foot on the Fate Lotus Taoist altar. When the other old monsters saw this, they would be lying if they said they were not envious. Seeing that Lin Sun did not leave this time, their enemies felt even more depressed. Lingwu Realm. On Dao-seeking Divine Mountain, Ren Futian and the rest suddenly sensed something and looked at the ocean of destiny in the sky. The lotus of life of the Great Path, which was quietly floating in the air, suddenly buzzed. Divine light flowed, and then many figures flew out from it. The battle is over. Ren Futian and the rest perked up and walked out of their cave abodes. They gathered at the peak and waited quietly. Not long after, they saw Lin Sun and Xing Gorge return. On this day, everyone on Dao-seeking Divine Mountain knew about what happened in the world of the Fate Lotus, and it caused a great commotion. On that very night, a grand banquet was held on Dao-seeking Divine Mountain, and all the disciples of Mount Heart and the cultivators of the Origin sect and Spirit sect participated in it. They toasted each other, and it was a joyous and harmonious atmosphere. From that day onwards, Lin Sun began his closed-door cultivation. Year after year passed. 10 years later, Lin Sun, who was in closed-door cultivation, suddenly opened his eyes and his mind shook. Buzz, a cauldron formed from the Nirvana order, appeared in the sky, and there was an illusory figure floating in the cauldron. The figure was unruly and arrogant, and his aura was unrestrained. He seemed like the war god who could conquer the 9 heavens. It was the first descendant of Mount Heart, the war emperor. Eldest senior brother, Lin Sun was excited and filled with joy. Ever since he stepped into the boundless realm and completely integrated the Great Path rules into the Nirvana Profundity, his control of the Nirvana Profundity had reached an unimaginable level. After years of reconstruction, the trace of vitality left by eldest senior brother had undergone a tremendous change. Now, he was only one step away from Nirvana rebirth. Chapter 32-31. Eldest senior brother, it's up to you now. After a while, Lin Sun calmed down. He had already done what he needed to do. Right now, if eldest senior brother truly wanted to be reborn, he could only rely on himself. Like a phoenix undergoing nirvana, a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon. All of this required eldest senior brother to undergo this rebirth transformation himself. On the same day, Lin Sun found second brother Zhong Xiu and third sister Rosu. When Lin Sun told them the good news, all the senior brothers and sisters were excited and showed signs of losing control of their emotions. In Fangsu Mountain, eldest senior brother was definitely a role model. He was the person that everyone respected the most apart from their master. Back then, when his body and primordial spirit were shattered by the heart pot, he had once caused the descendants of Fang Siyuan to be incomparably mournful. Now, after so many years, Lin Sun, the youngest junior brother, reshaped it. Who wouldn't be excited and happy? Little junior brother, thank you. Zhong Qiu cupped his fists and bowed. Little junior brother, thank you. The other senior brothers and sisters also cupped their hands. Everyone's heart was surging, and it was difficult for them to calm down. At the same time, on a chilly and precipitous mountain in the ruins of Myriad Wonders Dao, suddenly, the master of the heart core who was playing chess was stunned, and then he laughed heartily. Excellent. The opportunity to transform that belongs to my eldest disciple has finally arrived. From now on, he'll be able to escape from fate and be unfettered. On the opposite side, the handsome golden cicada in hemp clothes pointed at the chessboard and said with a smile, Brother, you've lost. The master of the heart core looked down at the chessboard and was speechless. He said, The beauty of chess is determined by one's state of mind. My state of mind has changed, and that's why you, golden cicada, have the upper hand. However, I'm happy that I lost this game, huh? Jean Chan said, From now on, your eldest disciple will not be shackled by fate. Naturally, it is a cause for celebration. However, since he was able to undergo such a transformation, it's obvious that your little disciple has already fully comprehended the profundities of rebirth. If nothing unexpected happens, then perhaps he'll come to the ruins of Tao in a few years. The core master nodded and said, "What will come will come." Golden Cicada thought for a moment and said, "Tao brother, may I be so bold as to ask, why did you choose this child back then?" The master of the heart core pondered for a moment and said, "I didn't mean it." Golden Cicada's eyes lit up. Then he clapped his hands and praised, "What an unintentional willow." One of the escaping ones is naturally an unintentional willow. If he had planned and screened in advance, he would have fallen into a disadvantage. The master of the square smiled bitterly. "I won't hide it from you. It's not so much that I chose Lin's son as my disciple. It's his own path that I've been waiting for. Everyone in this world knows that I am waiting for that lotus. Why should I wait instead of searching for it? This Tao cannot be forced," Golden Cicada said with a smile. "Okay." The master of the core dimension smiled and nodded. "Because of this, I have never interfered with his cultivation. His achievements today are entirely due to himself, not me, his master." Golden Cicada thought about it and said softly, "Fate is too wonderful for words." Sea of Fate, Martial Spirit Realm. Lin Sun resumed his closed-door training. Previously, he had already handed over the Tao body that belonged to his eldest senior brother, Zhong Xiao, to take care of. As for when eldest senior brother would wake up, that would depend on him. Another 13 years passed. The seventh Tao life lotus appeared. Lin Sun, Xingjiang Gorge, and Fu Nanli set off for the world of life lotus together. Only 21 days later, the Great Path competition came to an end. During this period, Lin Sun traveled around the world of life lotus alone and killed 8 of his enemies one after another, causing another uproar in the world of life lotus. In the final battle for the life lotus altar, Lin Sun's luck was not so good. In the first round, he encountered Taoist Shui Sun, a top existence. Although he won in the end, he was seriously injured and had to give up the next battle. And the final victor of the Great Tao competition was Divine Lord Baiya. In his camp, there were 3 old monsters who successfully rode on the Fate Lotus Tao altar and headed for the many wonderful Tao ruins. It was worth mentioning that in this world of life lotus, Lin Sun and Xia Ji also absorbed and refined more and more rule of destiny. Since then, the Tao life lotus would appear every once in a while, and Lin Sun and Xia Ji would participate in it. Flowers bloomed and withered. 300 years passed in a flash. In the 24th appearance of the world of life lotus, Lin Sun, Xia Ji, and Fu Nanli sat cross-legged on the Yin-Yang Pass. "I wonder how those old guys are doing in the ruins of Tao." Xia Ji drank a mouthful of wine and thought of the mountain wind Tao Lord, Sun Daoyan, and Ling Long, who went to the ruins of Tao from the Sea of Destiny a long time ago. "After we snatch the Fate Lotus Tao altar, you and Senior Fu can go and take a look, and you'll know." Lin Sun smiled. It had been 300 years. In this period of time, they had participated in more than 10 battles for the world of life lotus. There were failures and successes. Mountain Wind Tao Lord, Sun Daoyan, and Ling Long had already ridden the life lotus altar to the ruins of Tao. "What about you? Do you really plan to keep killing your enemies in the world of life lotus?" Xia Ji asked. In these 300 years, Lin Sun would seek revenge on his enemies whenever he entered the world of life lotus. By now, the factions that his enemies were in had long been defeated. The remaining enemies like Jiang Yin Shui, Ying Tiansheng, Zhu Tianjun, and Huang Long dared not enter the world of life lotus in the last 100 years. "It's still early. I'm not in a hurry." Lin Sun smiled. What's more, although Du Feng and Wang Xinghai suffered a lot of casualties in these years, they haven't really been defeated. Maybe I'll consider going to the ruins of Tao after I kill Du Feng and Wang Xinghai. Now, there are only 300 years left before the arrival of the Era Calamity. But this was more than enough for Lin Sun. Du Feng and Wang Xinghai are obviously very afraid of you now. If they want to avoid you, it will be difficult for you to seize the opportunity to deal with them. Fu Nanli said in a low voice. In these years, Lin Sun had made great progress. In a one-on-one situation, the powerful figures like Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi were no longer his opponents. It was no exaggeration to say that in the world of Life Lotus, except for Su Wanjun, who had never participated in the struggle for the Great Way, Lin Sun was the strongest. Qi Qianji, Tian Xingzi, and the others all admitted this. After all, they had been defeated by Lin Sun one after another. Because of this, Du Feng and Wang Xinghai didn't want to fight with Lin Sun at all. Once they encountered a situation where they might fight with Lin Sun, they would give up in advance. Lin Sun had also gone to the Heaven Gate guarded by them to challenge them. But it was a pity that Du Feng and Wang Xinghai would retreat in advance. So far, Lin Sun hadn't been able to seize the opportunity to kill them. It's not a big deal. I'll catch them sooner or later, Lin Sun said softly. He didn't tell Xing Jiangorge that Lin Sun had made a new discovery as he comprehended the power of fate in the world of Life Lotus. That was, the power of rule covered by the Sea of Fate could no longer suppress him. Even without the power of the Great Tao Life Pearl, Lin Sun could step into the Sea of Fate without being suppressed or hurt. Lin Sun was very clear that if he could travel through the Sea of Fate at one day, he might be able to break through the barrier and enter other era worlds. By then, he wouldn't need to enter the world of Life Lotus. He could kill his enemies in the era worlds. Lin Sun, this time I want to participate in the Great Tao struggle. Xia Ji suddenly spoke, her voice as clear as the sound of nature. Okay, Lin Sun agreed with a smile. Xia Ji had completely refined the power of the seal left by Eternal Night, Divine Emperor. Her cultivation was equivalent to Eternal Night, Divine Emperor at his peak. The most terrifying thing was that Xia Ji controlled the power of fate, karma, and time. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun had to use all his strength to defeat her. A few days later, the time to snatch the Life Lotus altar had arrived. Lin Sun and the others returned to the area before the altar. But compared to before, there were clearly fewer old monsters participating in the Great Tao struggle. Top figures like Baya Emperor and Fa Wuxiang had already gone to the Ruins of Wonder. This time, there were only 4 camps participating in the Great Tao struggle. They were Qi Qianji, Tian Xingzi, Lin Sun, and Shui Sun. What about Du Feng and Wang Xinghai? Lin Sun was stunned. Unless you go to the Ruins of Wonder, I'm afraid they won't come to the Life Lotus realm again, Qi Qianji said with emotion. Not only them, many old guys from other camps won't come either, Tian Xingzi added. After all, those camps that hated Lin Sun were only a part of them. In addition, there were many other camps, but they were not powerful. Originally, these camps also had the opportunity to participate in the Great Tao struggle. But because of Lin Sun's existence, the old guys from these camps gave up on the idea. As a result, there were fewer and fewer camps participating in the Great Tao struggle. Seniors, do you mean that I'm the culprit? Lin Sun smiled bitterly. Qi Qianji laughed. Haha, I won't hide it from you. Now, the old guys from different eras in the Sea of Destiny only care about one thing. When will you go to the Ruins of Wonder? As long as you leave, the Life Lotus realm is destined to return to its previous state. Although Taoist Wanjun has unparalleled combat power, everyone knows that she won't participate in the Great Tao struggle. But you're different. As long as you're here, except for us old guys, no one will foolishly come looking for trouble, Tian Xingzi teased. Lin Sun thought for a while and said, if I have the chance to send Sword Gorge and Fu Nanli away this time, I won't participate in the Great Tao struggle for the Life Lotus realm in the future. He added, of course, if Du Feng and Wang Xinghai dare to participate, I won't just stand by and watch. Hearing this, Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi looked at each other and felt inexplicably relieved. In the past 300 years, Lin Sun's power was so great that he dominated every Great Tao struggle. If this guy continued to participate in it, Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi would feel bored. After all, who would like to be defeated by Lin Sun again and again? They weren't masochists. P.S. Everyone's criticism, goldfish fighting, the plot of the Sea of Destiny will end faster. Next, Goldfish would seriously write out the plot of the Ruins of Myriad Wonders of Tao. She would strive to write with some vigor and spirit so that she could write a perfect ending. Chapter 32:32. The battles soon began. Xie Ji, Lin Sun, Tian Xingzi, Qi Qianji, and Daoist Shui Sun took turns to fight. It was also this time that Tian Xingzi, Qi Qianji, and the other old fellows witnessed the terrifying strength of Xie Ji. In the two battles, Tian Xingzi and Dao, being Shui Sun, were defeated by summer solstice one after another. Until the end of this battle, Xie Ji, who had won 2 rounds, became the final winner without any suspense. I know who she is. Qi Qianji's expression was complicated. There was shock and realization. With fate as her crown and karma as her staff, she roams the land of eternal night. Apart from her, there's no one else in the world who possesses such power. Tian Xingzi also sighed. Previously, he was a little unconvinced that he had been defeated by Xie Ji, but after discovering Xie Ji's true identity, he seemed to be relieved. Is it really that legendary figure? I heard that she came from the ruins of myriad Dao. Unbelievable. Many of the old monsters present seemed to have recalled some rumors from long ago, and the way they looked at Xie Ji changed. Even Lin Sun was surprised that Xie Ji's previous incarnation was so famous. Xie Ji, did the Eternal Night, Divine Emperor, really come from the ruins of Dao? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. Yes. Xie Ji nodded. There are indeed some things related to the ruins of Dao in her memories, but most of them are very blurry. It seems as if she herself had erased them. Lin Sun's pupil shrank. All the cultivators in the world yearned to head to the ruins of Dao. But who could have imagined that a figure like the Eternal Night, Divine Emperor actually came from the ruins of Dao? This was too inconceivable. Su Wanjun, who had been watching coldly from afar, finally dared to believe it at this moment. She murmured in her heart, "No wonder he can control the power of fate." It turns out that Lady Xie Ji is the Eternal Night Emperor he mentioned. On that day, the great Dao Fate Lotus carried Xingjian Gorge and Fu Nanli towards the myriad Dao ruins. Lingwu Realm. On Dao-seeking Divine Mountain, Lin Sun was drinking wine with his senior brothers and sisters from Mount Innerheart. Eldest senior brother hasn't woken up yet? Lin Sun asked casually while chatting. Zhong Qiu smiled and said, Eldest senior brother is probably comprehending the Dao. Even though he hasn't woken up since these past few years, the aura he emanates is growing stronger and stronger. I can foresee that when he truly wakes up, he's bound to undergo a transformation that's akin to breaking out of a cocoon and becoming a butterfly. Lin Sun smiled and nodded. Little junior brother, only you and Miss Xie Ji remain in the spirit martial world that possesses the ability to head to the ruins of Dao. When do you intend to leave? Ruo Su asked gently. Lin Sun said with a smile, Don't worry. I plan to practice again. When I'm ready, I'll set off for the ruins of Tao. When the banquet was over, Lin Sun went into closed-door training again. In the past 300 years, his cultivation had improved many times, and every single improvement wasn't inferior to the advancement of a small realm, causing his combat strength to be much stronger than before. But in recent years, Lin Sun found that he had reached a bottleneck and couldn't make any progress. However, it was a happy thing for Lin Sun, because so long as he broke through this bottleneck, then perhaps he would be able to realize a breakthrough in his cultivation in a true sense. In the past, I could only be considered to have improved time and time again in the initial stage of the Boundless Realm. But now, if I'm able to break through this bottleneck, then perhaps it'll be equivalent to stepping into the intermediate stage of this realm. Within the abode, Lin Sun, who sat cross-legged, cultivated as he pondered. Boundless was the limit of infinity. This realm was like a long and boundless path of the Tao, and every single old freak sought and advanced on it with the intention of arriving at the end of this realm. But since the ancient times until now, there were very few that were truly able to attain the ultimate state of this realm. For example, the absolute beginning sovereign, Chun Shi, that mysterious swordsman, and so on and so forth. To Lin Sun, he'd always been improving on this path of the Tao during these past few years, and his cultivation had undergone many transformations and improvements. Even if his combat strength was already formidable to the point of being able to defeat top big shots in the boundless realm like Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi, if one were to seriously study it, then his current cultivation was only at the initial stage of the boundless realm. But now, if he could break through this bottleneck, he could step into the intermediate stage of the boundless realm. All Tao returned to one. All Dharma returned to one. All things returned to one. On the path of cultivation, the boundless realm is the ultimate of the eternal path of the Tao, the final stage of the entire cultivation path. It's deduced according to the number of the great Tao, and everything will return to the ultimate one. It starts from one and ends from one. It's the same for the 9 heavenly divination realm. From the beginning to the end, it will be consistent. As he pondered, Lin Sun was gradually immersed in a deep level of comprehension. 30 years later, boom! In the abode, 5 great Tao forms appeared out of thin air and surrounded Lin Sun. And as Lin Sun's mind moved, the greenwood Tao form suddenly turned into a soft and thick cyan Tao light and integrated into Lin Sun's cultivation. Then the 4 great Tao forms of red fire, white gold, yellow earth, and black water all turned into 4 kinds of the original power of the great Tao, red, white, yellow, and black, and integrated into Lin Sun's cultivation. Lin Sun's qi was rising steadily, and infinite divine light emerged. So far, all the supreme magic and magic he had mastered were integrated into one and turned into a part of Lin Sun's own Dharma. This was the so-called all Dharma return to one. From now on, the power of Lin Sun's own body was equal to the fighting power of the 5 great Tao forms together. 50 years later, tut! Lin Sun suddenly opened his eyes and shouted like thunder in spring. Boom! The abyssal sword cauldron, which had been floating in front of him, seemed to be completely melted and turned into a dazzling light, pouring into Lin Sun's body. From now on, the abyssal sword cauldron and I are inseparable. In this way, it can be said that all things return to one. From now on, all Tao is at my disposal. All Dharma is under my control, and all external things are under my control. Lin Sun's body was flowing with Tao light and divine light, and all kinds of magnificent and incredible visions emerged. The bottleneck of cultivation was also broken at this moment like a layer of window paper. 60 years later, in the sea of fate, a life lotus of Tao emerged, causing monstrous turbulence. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun rose from his closed-door training. At this moment, he didn't have the slightest aura, and he seemed like an ordinary person that was extremely ordinary. But when the light in his eyes flowed, there was an obscure Taoist light that was enshrouding and rising. Xia Ji, do you want to go to the life lotus world again? All right. Immediately, Lin Sun and Xia Ji flew into the world of life lotus. Lin Sun revisited the old place, but his mood now was completely different. Fellow Taoist, please wait. On the way, Lin Sun met a group of practitioners by chance and immediately stepped forward. The other party clearly came from the same camp, both having boundless realm cultivation. When they saw Lin Sun, they immediately stopped, revealing expressions of fear. Have you seen Qi Qianji? Lin Sun smiled and cupped his hands. Seeing that Lin Sun was just asking and chatting, he didn't reveal anything, only then did these old monsters heave a sigh of relief. A gray-robed man said, Qi Qianji has already left during the last great path battle. Gone? Lin Sun was stunned. Where is Tian Xingzi? I've also headed to the ruins of Tao. The gray-robed man said. Lin Sun felt a sense of loss in his heart. In the sea of fate, the only friends he was familiar with were Qi Qianji, Tian Xingzi, and a few others. Obviously, if he stayed in the sea of fate, he was destined to never see those friends again. Have the 2 camps of Dufeng and Wang Xinghai ever been here? Lin Sun asked again. No, they haven't. The gray-robed man said with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. In the past 60 years, the world of Life Lotus had appeared twice. Although Lin Sun didn't participate, its power was still there. How could Dufeng and Wang Xinghai dare to participate? Thank you. Lin Sun cupped his hands and was about to leave. The gray-robed man couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Lin, may I ask if you are here to participate in the Great Path Battle?" The other old monsters present also pricked up their ears. 60 years ago, Lin Sun had stated that he would not participate in the Great Path Battle before killing Du Feng and Wang Xinghai. This was naturally a great thing for other practitioners in the world of Life Lotus. But if Lin Sun participated this time, the situation would be completely different. "I won't participate." Lin Sun shook his head with a smile. The gray-robed man and others suddenly felt relieved. Lin Sun and Xia Ji turned around and left. Have you noticed that Lin Sun doesn't have a trace of aura anymore? So people can't feel his power anymore. It's like facing a mortal. Until Lin Sun's figure disappeared, an old man said in surprise, "Does this mean that in the past 60 years, he has made some incredible breakthrough? Everything is gone. Everything has returned to its original state. Every single action is natural. Such a change is truly too shocking. I just don't know when he will go to the ruins of Tao." These old monsters had already flown away while talking about Lin Sun. When talking about Lin Sun, they all sighed with emotion. No one knew when it started. But Lin Sun seemed to have become a terrible existence in the sea of fate that couldn't be provoked. As long as he didn't leave, it was destined that no one would dare to ignore his existence. "Where are we going next?" Xia Ji asked on the way. "My old friends have left, and there is nothing to stay in the world of Life Lotus. I plan to go to other times." Lin Sun said casually, "You are no longer afraid of the pressure of the sea of fate?" "Yes, when I came to the world of Life Lotus, I already felt that I can travel in the sea of fate at will. Take me with you." "Okay." Lin Sun suddenly raised his head and looked into the distance. A fiery red figure appeared. She was as pretty as a young girl and radiated radiance. It was Su Wanjun. "Greetings, senior." Lin Sun cupped his hand slightly. Su Wanjun said, "I finally see you. I'm here to say goodbye." Lin Sun was stunned and said in surprise, "Senior, have you decided to go to the ruins of Tao?" "Yes." Su Wanjun nodded. "I have thought it through. The power of fate is not something I can comprehend and control, so I have decided to leave. But before I leave, I want to have a chat with you." Chapter 32-33. Su Wanjun, a demoness who had waited for 13 eras in the Sea of Fate in order to seek the power of fate. She was a terrifying existence that all the old monsters were afraid of. She had the appearance of a young girl, radiant and radiant. She had always been a loner. Now, she chose to leave and go to the ruins of Tao. Lin Sun didn't know whether she had completely given up or completely detached from her obsession. "Do you have a pair of whetstones on you?" Su Wanjun stared at Lin Sun with her beautiful eyes. "Yes." Lin Sun was surprised. "How do you know?" Su Wanjun stretched out her right hand, and a scabbard made of wrought tan appeared in her palm. It was gray, simple and unsophisticated, and filled with the breath of time. "It told me." A trace of tenderness appeared in Su Wanjun's eyes. "It's the same as the whetstone in your hand. It's from the same master. When I first saw you, I already noticed it. However, I didn't have a chance to talk to you about it. Now that I'm leaving, I want to talk to you about its master." Lin Sun was shocked. Sure enough, the swordsman Su Wanjun mentioned was the mysterious and unfathomable master of the whetstone. That swordsman had left 2 whetstones, one engraved with nourishing heart as jade, and the other with sharpening heart as sharp. He had pursued the way of sword, fought for reincarnation, and walked in the changing of eras. He had sighed with emotion that it was too lonely to have an opponent in the world. He had also entered the ruins of Tao and chose Nirvana Samsara to start over. He wanted to find another way and walk on the road of Tao. But what was the relationship between the master of the whetstone and Su Wanjun? Su Wanjun looked at the wrought tan scabbard in her hand and said, "All swords in the world, whether cast by ordinary iron or refined by immortal gold, have a scabbard. Some people nurture their swords with their own bodies, and they themselves are the scabbard. Some people nurture their swords with blade-strengthening gourds, sword sheaths, and other things, which can also be regarded as a scabbard. Do you know why the swords in the world need a scabbard? Lin Sun was stunned. This was an extremely common question, but when he thought about it carefully, he found that this question had a deep meaning. After pondering for a moment, he said, "In my opinion, the sword and the scabbard complement each other. One is in charge of killing while the other is in charge of hiding. It's just like one is active while the other is still. One is tense while the other is relaxed." Su Wanju nodded. "I am not surprised that you have such an opinion." She paused for a moment, and then her eyes were suffused with recollection. The sword will kill when it's unsheathed, and the sword will hide when it's withdrawn. Most sword cultivators in the world are wholeheartedly focused on tempering the edge of their swords, yet they don't understand that the essence of the sword Tao lies in hiding. "Hi!" Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. The so-called concealment is to store a breath of air, nurture a strand of spirit, and temper a bright sword heart. Su Wanjun said, "If you can't do that, it will be difficult for you to have great accomplishments in the sword Tao." Lin Sun thought for a while, "What if I can do that? Throughout the heavens and the four oceans, they are all the grand Taos of the sword. From the grand Taos to the minor Taos, they are all Taos of the sword." Su Wanjun said without hesitation. At that time, the mountains and rivers, the vicissitudes of life, the myriad phenomena of the mortal world, and all living beings in the world will reflect the heart of the sword, and they will all be able to enter the Tao. This is the true great freedom and great freedom sword. This sword is the heart of the Tao. This realm is the end of the boundless realm. Lin Sun was shocked in his heart, and he stood there blankly for a long time. After that, he seemed as if he'd awoken from a dream, and he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Senior, for your guidance." At this instant, he suddenly had an indescribable understanding, and all sorts of profundities coiled around his heart. It was indescribably wonderful. The sword killed when unsheathed, and the sword concealed when withdrawn. The heart of the sword was the heart of the Tao. At the bottom of it all, the end of the boundless realm depended on the state of mind. You don't have to thank me. This is what the owner of the sword whetstone told me before heading to the ruins of Myriad Tao, and I'm just telling you exactly what he said. When she spoke up to hear, Su Wanjun revealed a wisp of self-ridicule. What's laughable is that I persisted in seeking for 13 eras, yet I noticed in the end that this was a trap. Only today did I understand that he'd told me the answer a long time ago. At this moment, Lin Sun finally dared to confirm that Su Wanjuan's decision to head to the ruins of Myriad Tao wasn't because she'd given up seeking for 13 eras, but because she'd broken through a cage that trapped her state of mind, and she'd truly leaped out from it. Nurture the heart like jade, sharpen the heart like a blade. The sword whetstone doesn't sharpen the sword, but the heart. Su Wanjun said softly. Lin Sun's heart trembled slightly, and he fell into deep thought. The sword whetstone sharpens the state of mind, accumulating a breath of air, nourishing a cavity of spirit, and tempering a bright Taoist heart. In this way, one could be free and unfettered after a long time. Lin Sun let out a long breath and said, "Senior's words resonate with my heart." Where was the end of the boundless realm? Before this, Lin Sun couldn't see it, but now he vaguely saw a line. Since you possess the sword whetstone, you're naturally fated to meet him. Su Wanjun put away the wrought-tan scabbard in her hand and said, "Perhaps when you go to the ruins of Myriad Tao in the future, you can also meet him." Lin Sun was stunned, and in the end, he couldn't help but ask, "Senior, is the owner of the sword whetstone you mentioned the senior who calls himself swordsman?" Su Wanjun nodded. "So it really is him." Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart, and he recalled what Fu Nanli had said at that time. This person is an unparalleled overlord in Sword Tao. He's unyielding, and unparalleled. On the other hand, he's ethereal, unfettered, free, and extremely mysterious. No one knows his origins, but it's said that he once suppressed the heavens with a single sword, and his power of Sword Tao surpassed many eras, and no one has surpassed him until now. But after he ascended to the supreme path, he called himself swordsman. Farewell, my young friend. Without saying anything more, Su Wanjun turned around and left, and her red dress fluttered and disappeared in the boundless heaven and earth. Xiaji, let's go. Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and said, on the vast sea of destiny, the Great Way Lotus floated quietly. At this moment, a figure flashed out from the Great Way Lotus. It was Lin Sun. His clothes fluttered as he stood on the mighty torrent of destiny, and his eyes were like an abyss as he looked down. Suddenly, numerous magnificent worlds appeared in his mind, and they were like countless stars that were scattered under the sea of destiny, shining brightly. Those were countless epic planes. It's time to put an end to this once and for all, Lin Sun said softly. Then, his figure wandered in the sea of destiny like an ethereal light, and soon disappeared. 2 hours later, the Devil Plain, on a towering divine mountain, Ying Tiansheng and other old monsters of the Devil era were stationed. Where's Ying Tiansheng? Suddenly, an indifferent voice resounded between heaven and earth. The next moment, more than a dozen terrifying figures rushed out from the divine mountain, and the one leading them was Ying Tiansheng. Lin Sun, how did you enter this world? When they saw Lin Sun standing in the distance, Ying Tiansheng and the others all changed their expressions, and they couldn't believe their eyes. There were many eras around the Sea of Destiny, but because of the suppression of the power of the Sea of Destiny, no one could enter other eras' planes. But now Lin Sun was here. This made Ying Tiansheng and the others have a bad feeling. If I didn't come, the grievances between us wouldn't have been truly resolved. Lin Sun said indifferently. As he spoke, he raised his hand, and a Taoist sword fell into his hand. Then he slashed out. The heavens and the earth suddenly dimmed, and only an expanse of vast and mighty sword insight filled the void. This sword made Ying Tiansheng and the others feel despair. Compared to more than 300 years ago, the power Lin Sun displayed at this moment was much stronger. Even the boundless realm existences like them felt that there was no way to escape, and that a great disaster was imminent. Kill! Ying Tiansheng's eyes turned red, and his roar shook the sky. No one would sit still and wait for death. At such a dangerous moment, all of them took out their desperate means to resist. But when this sword slashed down, bang, 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 one figure after another was blasted apart by the vast and mighty sword intent, turning into ashes and smoke. These were all lesser Boundless Realm characters, and they couldn't withstand the pressure of such sword intent at all. Their bodies were as fragile as paper. When the power of this sword dissipated, there were only Ying Tiansheng and the other 3 greater Boundless Realm existences left. Each of them was in a sorry state, and they were all injured. The power of his sword was so terrifying. Looking at the expressions of Ying Tiansheng and the others, they were also full of fear. No one could imagine that Lin Sun's combat strength had become so powerful in just a few hundred years. If we bow our heads now, can we still exchange for a chance of survival? Ying Tiansheng's voice was low, and there was indescribable bitterness in it. If I were to lower my head today, would you all show mercy? Lin Sun asked. Ying Tiansheng and the others were silent for a while. Then, the fear between their brows turned into resolute ruthlessness, and they attacked together. Knowing that they would die, they would fight to the death. Heaven and earth roared, and the sword intent crisscrossed. After a moment, Ying Tiansheng and the others were all dead. Clang! The sword in Lin Sun's hand turned into a ray of light and disappeared. The Buddha plane, for your master, you are a variable that overturns the past and the future. For us, you are a disaster that brings destruction. Du Feng put his palms together in front of his chest, and his figure turned into drifting ashes, disappearing without a trace. On that day, all the enemies of the Buddha era were killed. The Witch Plane, the ruins of wonder will be your burial place. A roar full of unwillingness resounded through heaven and earth. Wang Xinghai's eyes were full of hatred and resentment, and then his body cracked inch by inch. Lin Sun shook his head and left. In the following period of time, Lin Sun's figure appeared in different aeroplanes. When he left, all the enemies scattered in these aeroplanes were annihilated. At this point, there were no more fetters in his heart, and his thoughts were clear. The path of revenge had always been like this. There would be no rest until one was dead. 1 year later, Lin Sun returned to the spiritual martial realm. When the life lotus world comes again, I will go to the ruins of wonder. Lin Sun found the senior brothers and sisters of Mount Heart and told them his decision. Zhong Qiu, Ruo Su, and the others were not surprised. They had expected this. But when they heard the news from Lin Sun, they could not help but feel disappointed and reluctant. 20 years later, the Tao Life Lotus appeared on the Sea of Fate. Under the escort of everyone on the Divine Mountain, Lin Sun and Xia Ji entered the Life Lotus world and disappeared. Chapter 32-34. Life Lotus World. When Lin Sun returned to this world, it didn't take long for all the practitioners in this world to know. Lin Sun has made it clear that he will leave the Sea of Fate. This is great news. It is said that he will go with a girl named Xia Ji this time. He is finally going to leave. In my opinion, let's not fight for the Life Lotus world this time. Let's see him off together. After hearing the news, all the old guys, no matter which era they came from, were overjoyed. For them, as long as Lin Sun didn't leave, it was like a big stone pressing on their hearts, making them fear his existence. Now, he was about to set off for the ruins of Tao. That feeling was just like sending away a god of plagues 9 days later. It was time to fight for the Life Lotus Taoist altar. The practitioners in the 9 heaven gates all set off as soon as possible. When they arrived in front of the Fate Lotus Tao altar, everyone's gaze turned to the same place. There stood 2 figures, a man and a woman. The man was handsome, and the woman was as beautiful as a painting. They were Lin Sun and Xia Ji. The scene was silent. It had been about 500 years since Lin Sun entered the Sea of Fate. During this period of time, it seemed that he was the only one who dominated the world, who knew how many terrifying enemies had died under his hands. Up until now, there wasn't a single person in the ocean of destiny who didn't fear his divine might. At this moment, when they saw Lin Sun appear in front of the Life Lotus Taoist altar again, the old monsters present recalled the past with complicated and subtle expressions. Would the old rules be followed in this competition? Lin Sun's eyes swept around, breaking the silence in the field. Everyone trembled, and a purple-robed old man hurriedly said, "We don't want to fight anymore. This time, we just want to see you off." Lin Sun was stunned and looked at the others. Exactly. We're clearly aware that fellow Taoist Lin's current cultivation is unparalleled in this world. Even if we continue to compete, none of us are bound to be a match for fellow Taoist Lin, so we've decided to give up on this competition. The old guys present spoke one after another. This surprised Lin Sun. After a while, he cupped his hands and said, "Then I really have to thank you." Then, he looked at Xia Ji beside him. "Let's go." Yes. Under the gazes of the crowd, Lin Sun and Xia Ji stepped onto the Fate Lotus Taoist altar. As Lin Sun ran his cultivation, the Life Lotus Taoist altar under his feet suddenly emitted obscure power fluctuations. Fellow Taoist Lin, have a safe journey. Someone cupped his hands. At this moment, everyone present clasped their hands together. No matter if it was fear or reverence, they had no choice but to admit that Lin Sun had already surpassed them on the boundless path towards the Tao. At this moment, when they saw him about to leave, besides feeling relaxed in their hearts, all of them couldn't help but sigh with emotion. It was as if they were watching a rising legend about to leave the world they lived in. It was an incomparably wonderful feeling. Thank you all for seeing me off. On the Fate Lotus Taoist altar, Lin Sun returned the greeting with a smile. The next moment, with a strange fluctuation, Lin Sun and Xia Ji quickly disappeared. On this day, the battle in the world of the Life Lotus came to an end. It was also on this day that the cultivators that were distributed throughout the various eras obtained the news that Lin Sun had headed to the ruins of Tao. For a time, some were happy, while some sighed with emotion. Some were happy. The spiritual martial realm, on the divine Tao mountain. When they saw the Tao Lotus flash towards the distance of the Sea of Destiny while emitting a magnificent rain of light, all the descendants of the Mind Mountain couldn't help but cup their hands from afar. Little junior brother, take care. At the same time, a rumble suddenly resounded in a cave abode on the mountain, and then a figure soared into the sky with an unruly and arrogant aura that shook the sea of destiny to the point of rolling. He didn't conceal his aura at all. He was like a war god that soared through the sky, causing the heavens and the earth to tremble and a myriad of Tao to tremble and wail under his feet. Little junior brother, thank you. He cupped his hands and spoke. His voice rumbled like thunder, and it revealed heartfelt gratitude. Eldest senior brother, he's awake. Eldest senior brother is seeing off little junior brother. Zhong Xiao, Ruo Su, and the others were stunned and extremely surprised. The ruins of Tao. In a dark and chaotic world, tribulation dust drifted and lightning flashed. Clatter, suddenly a wave of intense sounds of chains colliding resounded, and it was like the sound of metal colliding. After that, a figure flashed out from the depths of the ground. He wore a black robe that was neat and tidy, and his eyes were clear and deep. He seemed to be young, yet he gave others the feeling as if he'd stood towering above the annals of time and had experienced countless changes in the world. On the other hand, a thick and large black color chain was coiled around his body. It swished and shook violently, and the sounds of collision emanated strands of dazzling and terrifying divine radiance of the loss. It could be faintly noticed that this thick and large black colored chain was actually formed from a strand of sword chi. Haha, all of you so-called variables are variables in my eyes as well. It's time for a victor to be decided. The black-robed man started laughing, and he seemed to be extremely happy and delighted. Slap! The black color chain that bound his body seemed as if it possessed intelligence. At this moment, it erupted with terrifying sword insight that pressed down fiercely onto the black-robed man's body. The black-robed man let out a muffled groan while his figure staggered, and he was almost dragged down to the ground by the black-colored chain. Fellow Taoist, you've already reincarnated and recultivated. Why bother transforming your cultivation into this sword shackle that binds me? The black-robed man revealed a trace of helplessness as he lowered his head to look at the black chain. Forget it. When that variable arrives, we'll fight again and see exactly whose grand Tao is superior. Swish! In the next moment, his figure returned deep underground and vanished. Only the sound of the chain colliding reverberated through the heavens and the earth. Gradually, this gray and hazy world fell silent. A fist-sized crow with ink-black wings flashed over soundlessly, and then it descended onto a bald tree branch. Its scarlet-red eyes gazed towards the direction the black-robed man had vanished towards. Sectmaster, we've captured quite a few competitors from the Ocean of Destiny in the recent period of time. From them, we found out that the one lotus that old Geezer Subhoodie was waiting for is about to arrive. Should we take action? The crow spoke with a sharp voice that tore through the silence of the heavens and the earth. No. Deep underground, the black-robed man's voice resounded, and his tone carried a relaxed and delighted smile. Let him come. The door of profundities within profundities. Let me see how many doors he can pass through. The crow was obviously stunned, and then it said, Sectmaster, with the strength we've accumulated over the countless years, we can just directly annihilate him when he arrives. Why, the black-robed man interrupted it. You the Sectmaster? The crow's entire body trembled, and it lowered its head and said, I understand. You don't understand. The black-robed man's tone had already become cold and indifferent. Little crow, you've cultivated with me since you were young. Others take you to be a spirit of misfortune, yet I don't believe it. I've once helped you defy the heavens and change your fate 3 times. I utilized the energy of the grand Tao of 9 eras to reconstruct your fate and attain perfection in the boundless realm. But since I was trapped here, you little crow have been thinking too much. Do you think I'm unable to escape? On the bald tree branch, the crow's entire body trembled as it said, Sectmaster, I only want to help you eliminate the hidden dangers. I absolutely don't dare to have any disloyal thoughts. Time flowed by, Yet the black-robed man didn't speak again. But the more it was like this, the more it caused the crow's heart to go cold, and it felt even more perturbed and uneasy. After a long time, right when the crow was on the verge of being unable to endure the oppressive pressure, the black-robed man suddenly let out a long sigh and said, "Little crow, you accompanied by my side when I was young and witnessed how I cultivated all along the way. After countless years have passed, many friends have already left me, causing me to practically think that even if I've seen through the ultimate profundities of the ruins of Tao, in the end, I'll still be all alone." His voice was bleak and revealed a wisp of loneliness. The crow's emotions surged, and it said with a resolute voice, "Sect Master, I'll always serve by your side." "I hope so." The black-robed man's voice recovered its calm. "All those years ago, that swordsman discussed the Tao with me and took me to be his enemy. But it wasn't that I didn't admire his heart and soul. Even if he abandoned his cultivation to transform into these sword shackles to trap me here before he reincarnated, I didn't hate him at all. It's only a competition of the Grand Tao. To me, it's nothing. But it's different this time." When he spoke up to hear, the black-robed man said, "Those opponents are waiting for a variable, and I need this variable as well." "Do you understand now?" Crow said, "Sect Master, then what should I do?" "Tell the others about it. They'll naturally know what to do." The black-robed man spoke slowly. Crow was stunned. "But what if they choose to make a move against me? Then let them do as they please." The black-robed man didn't give it any thought. "But you absolutely can interfere. If I find out that you have even a trace of ulterior motives, then I'll definitely seize your cultivation and sever the friendship between us." Crow's entire body trembled, and it nodded with difficulty. "Go on." As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man didn't take any further action. After a short while, Crow flapped its wings and flashed towards the distance, and a trace of bewilderment still remained in its scarlet-red eyes. Why did the sect master give me such instructions? Why can't I directly annihilate that variable? Crow was unable to figure it out. Half a day later, after Crow flew out of this gray and hazy chaotic world, its entire mental state became relaxed, and it seemed as if the heavy shackles on its mental state had been removed. Even though the sect master is trapped, his might is growing more and more terrifying. Crow muttered in its heart. After that, its figure flashed, and it transformed into a black-clothed young woman. Her snow-white long hair fluttered while her eyes were crimson-red like glass, and they were translucent and clear. "Send a message for me. Summon the 9-division heavenly mandate Tao Lords to see me in the dark world." She stretched out a fair and slender finger, and then it shook lightly. A strand of black-colored divine flames transformed into a ray of light that vanished into thin air. After that, she stretched out her body and muttered in her heart, "Sect Master, I'll listen to you. I won't interfere in this matter, nor will I dissuade you. I'll just be a messenger that knows his place. However, could it be that you don't know that if they find out about this, then they'll definitely make a move? You're surely aware of that, right? There's another chapter at night. Chapter 32-35. It was also the hidden world of the ruins of Ways. Hundreds of years pass by in the blink of an eye. But in the ruins of Ways, there is a storm brewing and undercurrents surging. Golden Cicada sighed. He had been playing chess with the master of the heart all these years. When the storm is dark, it is also the time for the dawn to come. Once the rooster crows, the world will be white. The master of the heart said casually, "When the rooster crows, the world will be white. When the rooster crows, the world will be white." Golden Cicada understood the meaning of the master of the heart's words. He laughed. "Brother, you think of your disciple as the rooster who brings the dawn." The master of the heart core couldn't help but laugh, and he pondered for a while before saying, "My little disciple is a variable to us, but isn't he a variable to the primordium ruler who's being suppressed by the sword chains as well? I'm a little worried now." Golden Cicada picked up a chess piece but did not place it. "Are you like me, unable to make a move?" he asked. The master of the heart core nodded. "Ever since my little disciple transcended the river of eras, he has become a kindred spirit like you and I. I can't see through his future. He is not a chess piece of mine, nor is he wavering. It's just that he has no chess piece to play. Golden Cicada chuckled and said, "In the outside world, all of us can be called players, but in the ruins of myriad profound Tao, we're all people in the game. We're fighting for the height of the grand Tao, and we're comprehending the ultimate Tao of transcendence. The dangers within are difficult for you and me to predict, and I presume that even he, Tai Chu, is the same. If that is the case, we can just adapt to the situation." "Adapt to the situation," the master of the heart pondered. "You too, I have news." At this moment, a dry and shriveled voice sounded. An old man as thin as bamboo stepped out and appeared out of thin air. His beard and hair were unkempt. If Lin Sun was here, he would definitely recognize this man as Do So. Previously, the first servant of the absolute beginning sovereign, Heya, sent a message to summon the 9 Destiny Path Masters to the Dark World. "It seems that something big is going to happen," said Do So, his eyes bright. "I have a hunch that Lin Sun is coming." The Master of the Heart Core and Golden Cicada looked at each other and nodded. "Aren't the two of you going to move?" Do So's brows raised. "I can only stay in the hidden realm for the time, for an incense stick to burn. After that, I can only return to the myriad spirit Tao domain." "Fellow Taoists, just wait and see. Only when the true variable arrives will we have a chance to take advantage of it." Golden Cicada smiled warmly. "If Lin Sun comes, he will definitely arrive at the multitude spirit domain. If I take the initiative to make a move before he sets off the storm, I will be restrained everywhere. It's better to see how famous Lin Sun can make a name for himself." Do So looked at the Master of the Heart Core. "Fellow Taoist, do you think so too?" The Master of the Heart Core said, "The situation is unclear. We cannot rush." Do So sighed softly. "The enemy has already begun to plan and take action. Are we just going to bide our time like this?" "Fellow Taoist, how enormous is the ruins of profundity. There's the spirit God domain outside, the profound God domain at the center, and the profundity God domain within." The Master of the Heart Core's voice was slow and unhurried. "Since the ancient times until now, most of those that entered the ruins of profundity were trapped in the spirit God domain, and only a small portion of them were able to enter the profound God domain. Only the most mysterious profundity God domain has only a mere 10+ people that have the ability to enter it, yet not a single one of them dares to enter it. Why? It's none other than because fate is too great, and the calamity is too heavy." When he spoke up to hear, the Master of the Heart Core went silent for a moment before he said, "It isn't just us who are waiting. Our opponents are waiting as well. Even though that little disciple of mine is a variable, no one dares to say that his arrival will be able to overturn the situation in the ruins of profundity and allow us to find an opportunity to enter the profundity God domain. So, what's the harm in waiting a little longer?" Do So's gaze flickered, and he nodded after a short while. "Then we'll wait." The ruins of profundity God domain was divided into the spirit God domain, the profound God domain, and the profundity God domain. Amongst them, the spirit God domain was situated at the outermost area, and it contained 9 worlds. Every single world contained a door, and every single door contained a profundity. On the other hand, the profound God domain was situated at the center of the ruins of profundity. Countless worlds were scattered throughout this domain, and every single world had a different appearance and style. Up until now, no one had truly explored it. At the center of the ruins of profundity was the profundity God domain. This domain was taken to be the forbidden area of profundity. One could only sense the existence of this mysterious forbidden area by relying on one's own cultivation. However, since the ancient times until now, only a little over 10 people have been able to sense this mysterious forbidden area. Moreover, all of them had chosen to stop after they sensed the profundity God domain, and none of them dared to rashly enter it. Because in their senses, that place was a place of death that contained great fate and great calamity. If the time wasn't right, then one would definitely die upon entering it. So, even now, figures like the Master of the Core and Golden Cicada were still waiting within the profound God domain's hidden world. On the other hand, Do So was restrained by his cultivation in the Grand Tao. Even if he was able to appear in the profound God domain now, he had to return to it within the time for an incense stick to burn. Otherwise, he would definitely be annihilated by the laws of the profound God domain. On the other hand, figures like the Core Master and Golden Cicada possessed cultivations that allowed them to be free and unfettered in the profound God domain, so they could stay here for a long time. Then when do the two of you think it's the right time to make a move? Ask Due South. It should be when we pass through the 9-layer door and walk on the path of death, said the Core Master. It might also be when we arrive at the profound God domain. Golden Cicada pondered deeply before he spoke. Due So couldn't help but shake his head when he heard this. In my opinion, those subordinates of the Master of the Taichu sect will definitely not wait until then. There were 9 worlds in the profound God domain. Every world had its own door, and every door had its own profundity. The calamity contained within them varied from person to person. Passing through the 9-layer door was equivalent to passing through the calamity of the 9 worlds. Since ancient times until now, there were those who could accomplish this, but practically all of them were old fellows who had stepped into the advanced stage of the boundless realm and lived for countless eras. After passing through the 9-layer door, there was another path, the path of death. This path connected the profound God domain and the spirit God domain. Those who passed through it would be able to smoothly arrive at the profound God domain, and those who failed would lose all their cultivation. Compared to the calamity of the 9 worlds, the path of death was undoubtedly more terrifying. Figures like Golden Cicada and the Core Master had experienced so many calamities in the past to arrive at the profound God domain. As for Do So, the reason he was able to appear here was because he had borrowed the strength of the Core Master and Golden Cicada, and he had used a secret technique similar to the Eclipse Purloin to stay here for the time for an incense stick to burn. As far as Do So was concerned, there were many subordinates of the Master of the Taichu sect in the 9-layer world of the Spirit's God domain. These were the things that were the most difficult to guard against. Variables. If Lin Sun was able to arrive at the ruins of Tao, how could his cultivation be weak? Golden Cicada glanced at Do So. Fellow Taoist, he's no longer the young man you know. Do So was stunned at first, and then he slapped his forehead and laughed loudly. Concern leads to confusion. Concern leads to confusion. Thank you, brother, for the reward from the leader of Awadara. Tomorrow, we'll begin the main plot of the ruins of Tao. This is also the last plot before the end of the book, and many big shots will appear. Chapter 32-36. The Ruins of Tao, Primordial World. A heavy and chaotic aura suffused the heavens and the earth. The mountains and rivers were boundless, and it was empty and silent. A mountain stood towering at the center of this world. The mountain was chilly and towered into the clouds. Grandfather is still in closed-door cultivation. Chen Linkong stood halfway up the mountain, and he couldn't help but feel a wave of helplessness as he gazed at the nearby simple, elegant, and clean thatched cottage. How long do I have to wait? When this thought had just arisen in Chen Linkong's mind, a voice resounded in his heart. Soon. It was merely 2 words, yet it caused Chen Linkong's entire body to shake, and his eyes lit up. Grandfather, you've awakened. Who can sit still when a variable has arrived? This time, the voice sounded out from the thatched cottage, and it was tranquil and tranquil. It reverberated like the aura of the Grand Tao. There's no need to be impatient. Take a good look and comprehend it with your heart when the situation changes. Chen Linkong was an extraordinary figure as well, yet he was extremely obedient at this moment. Grandfather, you intend to deal with the culprit behind the scenes when the variable arrives as well? The tightly closed door of the thatched cottage opened, and then a tall and handsome figure walked out from within. At this instant, the originally dim heavens and the earth suddenly became bright and colorful, and everything seemed to glow with boundless vitality. Linkong, don't be anxious. An unsteady heart will cause your mind to relax, and a relaxed mind will cause distracting thoughts to arise. Once some extraordinary figures notice you, it's sufficient for them to easily capture you. As the tall figure spoke, he'd already strode up into the sky and arrived above the clouds. Within his field of vision, the entire profound God domain seemed to be within his field of vision. The countless worlds that were scattered throughout the profound God domain seemed like numerous dazzling pearls. The tall figure's gaze pierced through the dazzling worlds that seemed like countless pearls and looked towards the distance. There was an obscure and dark path towards the Tao there. It was called the Immortal Slaughter Path. The other end of the Immortal Slaughter Path was the Spirit Domain. There are 9 levels in the Spirit Domain. There's a door in every heaven, and there's a profundity in every door. Linkong, let me ask you, how did you pass through that door when you entered the mortal transformation world? A tranquil voice drifted down from the sky. Shen Linkong said without hesitation. Back then, with my own great Tao, I faced 39 great Tao battles in the mortal transformation realm. In the first 30 battles, I used many swords and spent a lot of effort. After that, I couldn't be bothered to say another word and destroyed all of them with a single sword strike. At this point, I obtained a chaotic Tao fruit and ascended into the heavenly gates. Chen Linkong's heart couldn't help but surge when he spoke about all of this. Mortal Transformation Realm, a place to educate the common people. There is a competition of the Grand Tao between all the great figures that entered this world, and whoever won would be able to use their own Tao karma to influence the situation of the world. They would transform their own rules and laws into iron laws and rules that taught all living beings, causing all living beings in this world to accept the principles of the Grand Tao and regard it as the standard. When one accomplished this, one would be able to obtain the secrets of this world, the chaotic Tao fruit. It was a kind of natural law that was born from the origin of chaos. At this point, he would be able to smoothly pass through the first heaven door. Back then, what did the Tao karma that you established in the mortal transformation realm turn into? Above the clouds, the tall figure asked with interest. Shun Linkong said, a sword steel. Although it's only 3 feet long, it has the power to sweep through the heavens. Back then, it was already listed in the heavenly cycle Tao laws of the mortal transformation realm. At this point, he couldn't help but ask, Grandfather, why are you asking about this? In the past, there have been many great figures from different eras who have descended upon the ruins of myriad Tao. The first trial appeared in the mortal transformation realm. If I'm not wrong, then up until now, there are already 1,614 people who have passed the first barrier of the heavenly barrier. But do you know how many great figures are trapped in the mortal transformation realm? The tall figure answered his own question. At least 10,000 people. 10,000 people who have stepped into the boundless realm means that there are 10,000 Grand Taos. Everyone wants to stand out in the competition for the Grand Tao so that their Tao can occupy a place in the heavenly cycle Tao laws of the mortal transformation realm. You can imagine how intense the competition is. At this point, the tall figure asked, Linkong, how long did you take to pass the mortal transformation realm's heavenly gate? 33 years. Chun Linkong answered without hesitation. The tall figure asked again, then, how long do you think the disciple of the Master of the Heart will take to pass the mortal transformation realm? This, Chun Linkong fell into deep thought. When he left the ruins of fortune, Lin Sun was only a figure on the path of immortality. If Lin Sun had the ability to cross the sea of destiny and reach the ruins of myriad Tao, his cultivation would at least be in the boundless realm. Combining this with his knowledge of Lin Sun's foundation and talent, Chun Linkong said, once someone like him enters the boundless realm, his combat power will far surpass those in the same realm. If he wants to pass the mortal transformation realm's heavenly gate, he won't be inferior to me. The tall figure couldn't help but let out a laugh. The length of time is not enough to determine the level of cultivation. If I'm not wrong, Lin Sun is definitely different from those who have competed in the past. Chun Linkong couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Rumble. Dark clouds covered the sky, and lightning flashed. In the sky above the desolate mountains and rivers, dark clouds rolled and thunder surged, causing the mountains to tremble and all living beings to panic. Not long after, bean-sized raindrops poured down, causing the world to become misty, and the roars of birds and beasts could be heard from afar. Lin Sun and Xia Ji stood under a stone wall at the foot of a mountain. The stone wall had a depression of 10 feet, just enough for them to take shelter from the rain. Lin Sun looked around, and his eyes were in a trance. Previously, when he and Xia Ji stepped on the Fate Lotus Taoist altar, they only felt a change in the sky. It only took less than a quarter of an hour. The two of them appeared here out of thin air, and they saw the desolate mountains and rivers, and the rainy night was like a waterfall. This is the ruins of Myriad Dao. Lin Sun wasn't sure. He spread out his divine sense to sense the world. In an instant, all kinds of strange and incredible insights surged into his mind. The mortal transformation world is the #1 world in the myriad spirits realm. Its territory is endless and boundless. There are 49 countries built by ordinary people scattered across this world, and each country has billions of living beings. The great Tao fights, using one's own Tao to influence the world, using one's own rules to teach all living beings. Those whose Tao is included in the heavenly cycle Tao law of this world can obtain the chaotic Tao fruit and enter the heavenly gate. After learning these insights, Lin Sun finally dared to confirm that he and Xia Ji had indeed come to the ruins of Myriad Dao. However, the existence of the mortal transformation world was still very unimaginable. The great Tao fights were about superiority and influence of one's Tao. Only then could one's Tao be included in the heavenly cycle Tao law of the mortal transformation world and become an iron rule to teach all living beings. Interesting. Lin Sun told Xia Ji what he knew. Xia Ji thought for a moment and said in a clear voice, "It's nothing more than fighting to see whose Tao is stronger." Lin Sun laughed. That's right. He couldn't help but think of many people in his mind. For example, Master, Golden Cicada, Chen Linkong, and so on. He also thought of the Ocean of Destiny. The friends he had made in those years, such as Xing Jian Gorge, Fu Nanli, and so on. I wonder if I can meet them in the mortal transformation world, Lin Sun muttered. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in the distance. In the dark and violent night rain, faint sounds of fighting could be heard. Lin Sun was not surprised. Instead, he was happy. Come, let's go and take a look. Since they had just arrived, it would naturally be best if they could meet some fellow Taoists to understand the situation in the mortal transformation world. It would save them time to explore one by one. Immediately, Lin Sun and Xia Ji moved through the void. Not long after they flew south, they saw a deep mountain shrouded in torrential rain. Deep in the mountain stood an old temple. The sounds of fighting came from the temple. Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. He spread out his divine sense, and the scene he saw immediately changed. The inconspicuous temple actually transformed into a divine temple that emanated brilliant golden light, and it was divine and brilliant, as if it was the residence of the gods. Looking closely, there was a statue of a god in the temple. Its beard and hair floated in the air, and it looked dignified. It was as if a god had descended to the world. At this moment, the statue was shining brightly, and a bright and majestic figure was fighting. His opponent was a man in a gray robe. He held a cyan saber in his hand, and his body was shining with tens of thousands of layers of purple divine brilliance. It was shockingly a boundless realm existence. When he saw this scene, Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. He could clearly see that the golden temple and the shadow of the statue were formed by the power of rules. They were not real people. In other words, the man in the gray robe was fighting with the power of this temple. Deep in the mountains, there is a mysterious and extraordinary temple, and there is a boundless realm figure coming here to fight fiercely on this rainy night. What is he trying to do? Lin Sun became more and more curious. At this moment, swoosh! Suddenly, the man in the gray robe seemed to have sensed something, and his figure withdrew from the temple. Suddenly, the temple and the shadow in the temple fell silent. When he looked again, The temple stood among the mountains. It was old in vicissitudes of life, and there was no fluctuation of aura. "Who has come here? Please show yourself," the man in the gray robe said in a deep voice. The gray-robed man spoke in a low voice. His voice reverberated in the night sky and actually suppressed the rumbling of thunder in the sky. He held a cyan saber in his hand, and his figure was tall. The power of rules on his body turned into a misty purple gas, and his aura was tyrannical. "I came uninvited. If I have disturbed you, please forgive me." Lin Sun walked out from afar and cupped his hands at the man in the gray robe. Behind him, Xia Ji followed closely. The man in the gray robe glanced at Lin Sun and Xia Ji and frowned. "Don't you know that in the mortal transformation world, it is taboo to be spied on by others during the struggle for the Great Way?" "Struggle for the Great Way?" Lin Sun was stunned, and then he cupped his hands again and said calmly, "Don't be angry, Taoist friend. I have just arrived in this world, and I don't know the affairs of this world." The eyes of the man in the gray robe lit up, and he said, "It is understandable that you have just crossed the sea of fate and arrived here." He was obviously much more relaxed. He put away the cyan saber in his hand, cupped his hands, and said, "It is fate that we meet. My name is Nie Ting, and I arrived in the mortal transformation world before the immortal martial era was about to be destroyed. May I ask your name?" Lin Sun also cupped his hands and said, "My name is Lin Sun, and I come from the Lingwu era. So is Taoist friend Lin Sun." Wait, you're Lin Sun?" The man in the gray robe who called himself Nie Ting said. Suddenly, he seemed to realize something, and his pupils suddenly dilated. Kevin was stuck for a day, and the second night was a little late. Chapter 32-37. Torrential rain poured down and dark clouds rolled. Occasionally, lightning would cut through the darkness of the mountains and rivers, illuminating Nie Ting's expression. Lin Sun did not expect Nie Ting to recognize him. He asked, "Where did you hear my name?" Nie Ting calmed himself down and said, "In the past few hundred years, many competitors would talk about fellow Taoist Lin when they come to the mortal transformation realm. As a result, many people in the mortal transformation realm know about fellow Taoist Lin's deeds in the Sea of Destiny." Speaking of this, there was a slight change in his expression. Obviously, he did not expect to meet Lin Sun, a young man who had made a name for himself through killing. "I see." Lin Sun took out a pot of wine and pointed to a place that was sheltered from the rain. "My friend, can you accompany me for a drink and talk about the mortal transformation realm?" Nie Ting hesitated for a moment before nodding, "Sure." Soon, the two sat down and chatted while Xia Ji stared at the dark rainy night in a daze. For hours later, Nie Ting stood up and left. Lin Sun did not ask him to stay. He had learned many things about the mortal transformation realm from Nie Ting. "Xia Ji, when the rain stops, let's go to the kingdom of Qing," Lin Sun said. There were 49 countries in the mortal transformation realm, and the kingdom of Qing was one of them. It would take less than 3 days to reach the kingdom of Qing. It was a mortal country with emperors, ministers, dukes, and nobles. There were hundreds of millions of people living there. It was a vast territory. "All right," Xia Ji nodded. Lin Sun smiled and looked at the rainy night in the distance, deep in thought. According to what Nie Ting said, there were Tao veins of the heavens, and the earth distributed throughout the 49 kingdoms. Ordinary people were unable to see them, but cultivators were able to pry into the energy of the Tao laws of the universe from the Tao veins of the heavens and the earth. The so-called heavenly cycle Tao law was the power of order that maintained the mortal transformation realm. From ancient times until now, anyone who successfully passed through the gate of heaven would have their laws included in the heavenly cycle Tao law. The heavenly cycle Tao law could affect countless people in the 49 countries in the mortal transformation realm, and from there, have the effect of educating people. The more power a Tao law followed by all living beings in the world, the greater the influence of that Tao law. Just like believers, some believe in Buddhism, some believe in Confucianism, and some believe in Taoism, they were not the same. However, all living beings in the world only believed in a certain rule as an iron law and acted according to it. They were not true believers. Since ancient times until now, all the powerful beings who arrived in the mortal transformation realm naturally hoped to have their Tao karma included in the heavenly cycle Tao law. In this way, he would be able to influence all living beings in the world and obtain the mysteries of this world, the Tao fruit of primal chaos. In this way, he would be able to step into the heaven gate and enter the second world of the myriad spirits God realm. If they wanted to realize all of this, then they had to fight for supremacy in the grand Tao. In other words, it was the struggle for the Tao. Naturally, Lin Sun was not afraid of this. The reason why he had decided to go to the Qin kingdom was because only in the way of heaven and earth could he condense his own Karma Jade archive. The Tao Karma Jade archive was an item similar to proof, and it was formed from the energy of the laws of the universe within the Tao veins of the heavens and the earth. With this item, one would be qualified to fight for supremacy in the Grand Tao. Not only would one be able to clearly sense the other competitors scattered throughout the mortal transformation realm. Moreover, as the struggle for the Grand Tao progressed, one's Tao karma would be included in the laws of the universe. With this Karma Jade archive, one would be able to attract the Tao fruit of primal chaos. And the struggle for the Grand Tao was divided into two types. One was to compete with the other powerful beings scattered throughout the realm. The other was to compete with the energy of those whose Tao karma was included in the heavenly cycle Tao law. For example, the temple in the mountains not far away was formed from the energy of the heavenly cycle Tao law. It represented the Tao karma of a powerful being who had passed through the heaven gate. This powerful being's Taoist title was Spirit King Qi Yuling, and he had left the mortal transformation realm a long time ago. If one could defeat the Tao karma he had left in the heavenly cycle Tao law, they would naturally be able to replace him. Of course, this would not affect Spirit King Qi Yuling at all. After all, Spirit King Qi Yuling had left a long time ago. However, this wasn't without risks, because it was extremely easy to be defeated and even suffer casualties when fighting against a heavenly cycle Tao law. Previously, Lin Sun had already found out that Niet Ting had stayed in the boundless mountains and rivers for tens of thousands of years, and he had challenged the Tao karma left behind by Spirit King Qi Yuling hundreds of times. Unfortunately, he hadn't succeeded even until now. One must know that Niet Ting was an old freak who had overcome 6 great silence lifespan tribulations. He had arrived at the mortal transformation realm during the struggle of the last era, and after countless years, he still hadn't succeeded in obtaining the Tao fruit of primal chaos. It was obvious how difficult such a struggle for the Grand Tao was. Until late at night, the dark clouds in the sky dispersed, and the torrential rain became intermittent until it disappeared. Lin Sun stood up and soared into the sky with Xia Ji, and they headed towards the boundless mountains and rivers. A long time after their figures had disappeared, Niet Ting's figure returned, and he arrived before a temple in the depths of the mountains. Even though the sovereign of absolute beginning is trapped in the profound God domain, the forces under his command are said to be the number one power in the ruins of the profound Tao, and countless extraordinary old fellows are gathered there. Merely the 9 mandate Tao lords have a group of mandate envoys under their command. His gaze shot towards the distant sky as he muttered in his heart. They said a long time ago that when this lotus arrives, it must be annihilated 3 days later. Lin Sun finally saw a vast city in the distance. The city seethed with surging mortal qi, and the aura of various living beings were entangled within it. Cloud Prefecture City, an enormous city at the border of the Qin kingdom. In Lin Sun's eyes, besides the mortal qi that shot into the sky, he was faintly able to sense that there were over 7 types of energy of the laws that covered different areas of the city. Some of the energy of the laws were tranquil and clear. Some were strict, some were heavy like a mountain. All of them had their own profundities. Perhaps these are the energy of the Tao karma that was left behind in the heavenly cycle Tao law. Since they're distributed throughout this city, then it means that all living beings in this city are affected and enlightened by these shapeless energies. Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought. Even though he'd understood many things, he still had some doubts in his heart. This was the ruins of Tao, yet there were actually 49 mortal kingdoms in the mortal transformation world, and there were a myriad of living beings that didn't possess the ability to cultivate. Moreover, all those who came here to strive to obtain the chaotic Tao fruit and step into the heaven entrance had to utilize their own energy of the Tao to enlighten all living beings. Why is it like this? Could it be that there's some other reason behind all of this? All of this seemed to be very strange, and it revealed an aura that caused one to be unable to figure it out. In next to no time, Lin Sun shook his head and stopped thinking about it, and he flashed into Cloud Prefecture City with Xia Ji. The streets and alleys within the city crisscrossed with endless streams of people and carriages. All of them were ordinary people that didn't possess any cultivation. When Lin Sun and Xia Ji entered, no one was able to notice their existence at all. It wasn't that they intentionally concealed themselves, and it was because of a strange energy of the laws that caused the myriad of living beings to be completely isolated from cultivators like Lin Sun and Xia Ji. It seemed that they were all in the same city, but Lin Sun and Xia Ji could see all living beings, and all living beings were completely unaware of their existence. Moreover, Lin Sun gave it a try. When a carriage came from afar, his figure didn't move, but the carriage easily passed through him. There was no obstruction at all. When Lin Sun raised his hand and tried to touch the lanterns hanging in front of the shops on the street, he actually passed directly through the lanterns, but there was no trace of the lanterns being touched at all. It was as if Lin Sun's arm was air and didn't exist at all. Hey, could it be that everything in this city is fake? Xia Ji revealed a curious expression. No, everything is real. Lin Sun laughed. I understand now. In this mortal kingdom, we cultivators are the Tao. The Tao is nameless, shapeless, and colorless. Naturally, they can't see or touch it. After a pause, he said, similarly, we can't interfere with everything in this mortal world. If we want to affect their every move, we can only rely on the power of the heavenly cycle laws. As he spoke, Lin Sun looked not far away, where there came the sound of reading. It turned out to be an academy, in which many children were reading. Above the academy, there was a power of rule. Reading is undoubtedly the best way to educate all living beings. Lin Sun was thoughtful. Next, he and Xia Ji shuttled through the city together, showing all kinds of people in the world, but it was different from what Lin Sun had seen before. Every single person seemed to be experiencing their own lives, but every single move they made was enveloped by the invisible energy of the laws, to the extent that their thoughts, attitudes, and rules of conduct were all affected by the invisible Tao laws. However, this kind of influence was not manipulation, but a silent and natural nourishment. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun's heart inexplicably rippled. If the creatures in this world were like this, were the ordinary people in Xiao Empire the same? Ancient desolation, starry sky, ancient path, boundless world, eternal world, were the creatures in these countless worlds, universes, and territories also affected by different rule power? The more Lin Sun thought about it, the more he had an indescribable strange feeling. The creatures in the world were born and raised by the earth, but in fact, they were already affected by all kinds of forces. Where did these forces come from? In the heavenly cycle laws. In other words, the heavenly Tao in the eyes of cultivators. But now, in this cloud state city, Lin Sun suddenly realized that these contenders for the great Tao were fighting for a kind of power to replace the heavenly Tao. Not to enforce justice on behalf of heaven, but to transform oneself into Tao, and from Tao into heaven. That's right. Only when cultivators comprehend the great Tao and embark on the path of cultivation can they have the ability to control the rule and override the rule. Be it the immortal order or the eternal rule, in the end, they are all great Tao. Lin Sun murmured in his heart, deep in thought. He vaguely understood the mystery of the mortal transformation realm. Cultivators could comprehend the great Tao. Mortals also lived under the rules of the heavenly Tao. And for boundless realm existences like them, the struggle for Tao that they carried out was precisely the process of taking the heavenly Tao and replacing it. Chapter 32-38. Yinzhou City was vast. Lin Sun and Xia Ji wandered around for a while before they flew into the sky. The Qing Kingdom's Taoist meridian of heaven and earth was located in the capital. Departing from Yinzhou City, they had to cross 136 cities. The journey was extremely long. Even if Lin Sun and Xia Ji teleported with all their might, it would still take them a day to arrive. However, Lin Sun was not in a hurry. The sky above every city in the Qing Kingdom was shrouded in a different cycle of Taoist power, causing each city to show a different life. As Lin Sun and Xia Ji flew past these cities, what they saw and felt were all different. Because of the different cycle of Taoist rules, the birth, aging, sickness, death, love, hate, and fear of life were all different. The difference between good and bad, black and white, and the choice of good and evil in the world were also different. As they traveled, Lin Sun's brows furrowed little by little. Every Taoist rule had a different effect on all living beings. Lin Sun also saw that some cities were shrouded in more than 10 types of Taoist power, causing conflicts between the living beings in the cities because of the different rules they believed in and the different ways they did things. There were even many conflicts and bloody scenes, showing tragic scenes of death. It felt like different civilizations and different races were colliding and killing each other. The more the cycle of Taoist rules there is, it might not be a good thing. Lin Sun could not help but think if there is only one cycle of Taoist rules, and it is maintained above the mortal transformation realm, then there shouldn't be so many conflicts between the billions of people in the 49 countries of the mortal transformation realm, right? And with such a cycle of Taoist rules, the various civilizations of the mortal world could be merged into one, causing everyone to worship the same teachings and follow the same rules. In this way, the world could be unified. If I can think of this, how can the other great powers not think of it? It seems that the struggle of the great path that has happened in the mortal transformation realm since ancient times should be because of this. Lin Sun vaguely understood. For countless years, all the great powers who came to the mortal transformation realm wanted to use their own Taoism to stand above the heavens, to become the supreme and only yardstick to teach the people of the world. And to achieve this step, it was destined that there would be a difference in the great path. This might be the root cause of the struggle of the great path. One day later, the Qing royal capital. When Lin Sun saw the capital of the country from afar, he couldn't help narrowing his eyes. The sky above the imperial capital was enveloped by the laws of the universe, and it seemed like violet qi had come from the east. It was lofty and heavy, and it carried a boundless, powerful, and extremely miraculous aura. Along the way, Lin Sun had crossed 136 cities and seen all kinds of power of heavenly Tao. But in comparison, those power of rules were not as powerful as the purple Tao in the sky above the imperial capital. It was like the difference between a stream and a vast ocean. Such karma of the Tao is definitely something that an almighty figure that possesses extraordinary might can possess. Lin Sun thought to himself. At the same time, he noticed that all the living beings in the city had a myriad of grand phenomena, and the aura of the mortal world surged and seethed. Besides that, there were strands of terrifying aura mixed within it. That was the power belonging to a boundless realm existence. No wonder I've only seen a few fellow Taoists along the way. So they're all hiding in this imperial city. Lin Sun vaguely felt that there would be an unpredictable storm when he stepped into the imperial city. Summer solstice. This imperial city is no less than a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. I'm afraid we have to prepare for battle. Hearing this, Summer Solstice's clear eyes lit up, and she seemed to finally feel that she wasn't so bored anymore. She said in a clear voice, "Is the struggle for the great path about to begin?" Lin Sun nodded and said, "It has already begun." As they spoke, the two of them had already entered the imperial city. Just like before, the countless living beings residing in the city were completely unaware. But in Lin Sun's eyes, he could clearly feel that in the center of the imperial city, in other words, before the imperial palace of the Qin kingdom, there was an abundant aura of heavenly Tao. Without a doubt, the heavenly Tao vein that belonged to the Qin kingdom was located in that area. In front of the imperial city was an enormous square. Further in the distance were streets that extended in all directions. On both sides of the streets were various pavilions, taverns, tea houses, and so on. It was extremely prosperous and affluent. When Lin Sun and summer solstice gradually approached, they saw many boundless realm existences along the way. There was a youth sitting cross-legged in the sky of a tea house. His robe was as white as snow, and his sword was held horizontally in front of his knees. There was an old man with unkempt hair and a beard squatting in front of a tavern. He held a huge crimson wine gourd in his hand, drinking as he watched the bustling people of the world. There was a man clad in immortal armor, standing proudly in the clouds with his hands behind his back. He was like a god of war patrolling the world. There was a young woman dressed in a rainbow-colored dress, mingling in the crowd of taverns. She listened to the storyteller's tireless narration of chivalrous legends with great interest. There were more than 10 terrifying existences scattered around the imperial palace. Each one of them was doing their own thing, not interfering with each other. But when they saw Lin Sun and summer solstice appear, many gazes looked over. Finally, a new fellow Taoist has appeared. Do you recognize these two fellow Taoists? No, they look very unfamiliar. Waves of telepathic thoughts conversations rang out among those terrifying existences. Although they couldn't hear these conversations, Lin Sun and summer solstice could feel those gazes cast over from all directions. Summer solstice's exquisite black brows furrowed slightly. Lin Sun smiled and said, "Ignore them." The two of them minded their own business and were about to reach the huge square in front of the imperial palace. Suddenly, a mellow voice that was like a spring breeze rang out. "Fellow Taoists, could it be that you just come from the Sea of Destiny?" The one who spoke was a middle-aged scholar with a long beard and wide sleeves. He held a green bamboo slip in his hand and emitted a noble aura. "That's right." Lin Sun stopped and looked over. "Fellow Taoist, what advice do you have for us?" The middle-aged scholar smiled and cupped his hands. "I wouldn't dare to give advice. It's just that you've just arrived. I'm afraid you're not clear about the matters in front of the Qing Imperial Palace. I'd like to explain it to you." Lin Sun was startled. He cupped his hands slightly and said, "I'd like to hear the details." The middle-aged scholar's gaze swept across the boundless realm existences scattered around and said, "There are a total of 17 people here. Every one of them is waiting here for no other than two purposes. One is to wait for a person to be killed. The other is to wait for a worthy opponent." Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but ask, "What do you mean by a person to be killed?" The middle-aged scholar chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoists, you'll know after you've condensed your Tao Karma Jade archives." After saying that, he didn't say anything more. Looking at the other people present, they also didn't intend to speak. Lin Sun didn't think too much and went to the huge square in front of the imperial palace with Xie Ji. On the square, instantly, both of them felt the power of the Tao vein of heaven and earth. It was like magma surging in the depths of the square. When Lin Sun operated his own cultivation, he stretched out his right hand. Instantly, countless light raindrops appeared as if they were drawn and gathered in Lin Sun's right palm. Gradually, they condensed into a strange, illusory jade archive. And in Lin Sun's mind, unimaginable scenes appeared one after another. There were hundreds and thousands of Tao Karma power that turned into the heavenly Tao, shrouding the sky of the mortal transformation world and affecting billions of living beings in the 49 countries. The source of these Tao Karma power was scattered in the boundless territory of the mortal transformation world. Some turned into towering mountains. Some turned into sword steels, erected in a certain country. Some turned into auspicious clouds, scrolls, weapons, plants, and they were scattered in different places. Although the forms were different, they were all formed by the Tao karma of those who had obtained the fruit of chaos and passed through the heavenly gate of the mortal transformation world. Lin Sun also saw a temple deep in the mountains. This temple was formed by Qi Yuling's Tao karma. Back then, Lin Sun saw Nye Ting fighting against this temple. This made Lin Sun understand. What he was seeing now was the Tao karma scattered in the mortal transformation world. It was this Tao karma that turned into the thousands of heavenly Tao. These various things formed by Tao karma were called Tao karma manifestation. In other words, the temple formed by Qi Yuling's Tao karma was a Tao karma manifestation. Soon, the scene in Lin Sun's mind changed. Countless figures of different colors appeared, like dots of light scattered in the mortal transformation world. These were the auras of the Almighties scattered in the mortal transformation world. There were tens of thousands of them. At the same time, the illusory jade archive in Lin Sun's palm slowly solidified. When he tried to sense the jade archive, Lin Sun could immediately see the thousands of Tao karma manifestations and the locations of the tens of thousands of Almighties scattered in the different territories of the mortal transformation world. When Lin Sun looked at the Qing kingdom in the Jade Archive, he found that there were a total of 19 Almighties in the imperial city, including himself and Xie Ji. Moreover, there were 3 Tao karma manifestations scattered in the imperial city. They were a jade seal hidden in the depths of the palace, a bronze cauldron erected in front of a Taoist temple, and an ancient tree rooted in front of the imperial city's eastern gate. Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. With this jade archive, wouldn't it mean that he could easily identify the locations of all his opponents in the world? In other words, this jade archive was like a map. It displayed the locations of the Tao karma manifestations formed by the heavenly Tao. Similarly, he could also find the locations of the other Almighties scattered in the mortal transformation world through this jade archive. If I'm targeted by my enemies, no matter where I flee to, they'll still come looking for me. Lin Sun immediately realized the problem with this jade archive. Not only could it allow him to know the locations of his competitors, but it could also allow other competitors to know his location. There were pros and cons to it. Is this the secret of the Tao Karma Jade Archive? Lin Sun recalled Nye Ting's words. Only with the Tao Karma Jade Archive would one be qualified to participate in the Great Tao Contest and be able to clearly sense the other competitors scattered throughout the mortal transformation world. Moreover, as the Great Tao Contest progressed, when one's Tao Karma was included in the heavenly Tao rules, one would be able to use this Tao Karma Jade Archive to attract the Chaos Tao fruit. Chapter 32-39. It seems that I can't abandon this Jade Archive. As Lin Sun thought about it, the Jade Archive in his hand fused into the patterns on his palm. When he looked at Xie Ji again, she had already put away the Tao Karma Jade Archive. May I ask the names of the 2 fellow Taoists? The middle-aged scholar in the distance asked. The other Boundless Realm cultivators also looked at Lin Sun and Xie Ji. The atmosphere became subtly oppressive. Lin Sun looked over and said with a faint smile, "You didn't ask before, but waited until I condensed the Jade Archive. Isn't that a little unfair?" The middle-aged scholar's eyes narrowed, and then he chuckled. "Fellow Taoist, please don't blame me. The fellow Taoists in the mortal transformation realm are all aware that only by condensing a Tao Karma Jade Archive will we be in the same situation. You're right. With this thing, we'll be opponents in the struggle for the Great Way. In this case, whether it's revenge or a pure struggle for the Great Way, even if we escape now, we'll be watched at all times." Speaking of this, Lin Sun suddenly asked, "May I ask who the person you said you must kill before is?" The middle-aged scholar was stunned. Before he could speak, the old man standing in front of a restaurant with a giant red gourd suddenly said, "You're Lin Sun, right?" His words were casual and plain. But whether it was the middle-aged scholar or the other powerful figures present, they all quietly circulated their qi and stared at Lin Sun. Lin Sun was silent for a moment and suddenly smiled. "It seems that the person must be killed is me." When Lin Sun first met Nye Ting on that rainy night, Nye Ting once said that in the recent hundreds of years, Many cultivators in the mortal realm had long heard of Lin Sun's name and his deeds in the Sea of Fate. Under such circumstances, when he heard that the middle-aged scholar and the others were here to wait for a person must be killed, Lin Sun already had some doubts. When the old man in front of the restaurant called out his name, how could Lin Sun not understand that these old fellows were waiting for him here? It's really this guy surnamed Lin. In an instant, the middle-aged scholar's eyes narrowed while a wisp of coldness suffused the space between his brows. High up in the sky, the man in immortal armor who was as proud as a war god stepped out and floated down from the clouds. The white-robed young man who was sitting in the void got up and casually held the Taoist sword in his hand. The woman in the rainbow-colored dress who was listening to the storyteller in the tea house turned around and walked out of the tea house in the other directions. The mighty figures moved one after another. The chi emerging from them was like a landslide and a tsunami, covering the whole world and the huge square in front of the palace, as well as Lin Sun and Xia Ji, who were standing in it. The miraculous thing was that all of this didn't affect the myriad of living beings in the vicinity at all. The restaurants and tea houses were still bustling and clamorous, and the streets were still bustling with activity without end. They were in the same city, but it felt like they were in two different worlds. Lin Sun didn't retreat. He asked with a puzzled face, "Guys, can you tell me how much hatred there is between us that makes you wait here?" The middle-aged scholar smiled and said, "I'll tell you if you can survive." Lin Sun glanced at the crowd and smiled. "I hope it's as you said." Boom! Before he finished speaking, the man in immortal armor, who was as stalwart as a war god, moved first. Brilliant divine flames emerged from his body and illuminated the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Clang! As he waved his hand, the endless flame laws transformed into a saber and slashed out in an overbearing manner. "Let me do it." Xia Ji made the first move. She had long felt bored. When she was surrounded, she even had a sense of anticipation in her heart. How could she hesitate? Her graceful figure stepped forward in the air. As she waved her fist, the fist force burst out like a galaxy hanging in the 9 heavens. The mighty torrent was filled with the aura of time. It was so powerful that it easily blasted the saber apart and dispersed the laws of flames that covered the sky. The pupils of the man in immortal armor constricted. It was already too late to change his move. He immediately used his arms to block in front of him and took it head-on. Boom! The fist was like time. It instantly destroyed the figure of the man in immortal armor. It was as if he had fallen into the vast torrent of time. The power of the great Tao in his body was completely suppressed, and he suffered heavy injuries on the spot. His cultivation was blasted to the point that it fell by a large margin. At the boundless realm, there was no longer any need to fear the erosion of time. However, Xia Ji's fist forcefully suppressed the cultivation of the man in immortal armor. As a result, the power it produced could be said to be destructive and peerlessly tyrannical. One punch shook everyone present. The expressions of the middle-aged scholar and the others changed slightly. They immediately acted to help. More than 10 powerhouses moved together. The aura on their bodies was like a volcano that had been accumulating for a long time. Each of them revealed their own boundless might. The eternal Tao soldiers clanged and danced in the air. The supreme divine abilities pulled all the phenomena in the world and shook the world. Every single one of them seemed so terrifying. However, under such a situation, Xia Ji said, "Lin Sun, don't interfere." That clear voice was as pleasant as the sounds of nature. However, the meaning in her words made those powerhouses feel very uncomfortable. They were all existences in the same realm, but who had seen such arrogance? Unexpectedly, Lin Sun really didn't interfere. He stood in the distance and had a leisurely attitude as if he was watching the show from the other side of the shore. No one knew better than Lin Sun how formidable Xia Ji's current combat strength was. Just like when they were in the Ocean of Destiny, even the top big shots like Tian Xingzi and Qi Qianji didn't dare believe that a beautiful and charming young woman like Xia Ji would actually possess such heaven-defying strength when they fought. The battle erupted. Watching the battle from afar, one could notice that every single boundless realm existence revealed a unique and supreme, imposing aura. The combat strength they revealed displayed the laws of the grand Tao they'd grasped to the limit. Some were like gods that controlled wind and lightning. Some were like peerlessly overbearing sword exalts. Strands of terrifying, imposing auras and energies ceaselessly intertwined, collided, and fought in this expanse of the heavens and the earth, and they displayed a scene of boundless upheaval and destruction. On the other hand, the imposing aura that belonged to Xia Ji seemed to be extremely special and dazzling. It seemed like there were three rivers that shot through the heavens and the earth. One was destiny, one was karma, and one was time. Every single one of them could be said to be supreme Daos, and under Xia Ji's control, they revealed might that shook the heavens and the earth. Bang! In next to no time, a terrifying, imposing aura vanished as it was crushed by the torrent of destiny. It was the mighty figure that wore immortal armor that had been killed. His cultivation was pierced through by Xia Ji's spear in a head-on battle, and his body and soul were annihilated. At the same time, Lin Sun noticed that the aura of an almighty figure was missing from the Dao Karma Jade archive. This thing really is extremely miraculous. Lin Sun clicked his tongue in wonder. After that, his gaze shot once more towards the distant battle. A total of 16 almighty figures had besieged Xia Ji together, yet the situation had turned around. Xia Ji had suppressed 16 of them by herself. Humans. The strongest amongst them are only those two figures that are comparable to true monarch Yellow Dragon, and the others are slightly inferior. After fighting in the Ocean of Destiny for 500 years, the boundless realm experts that had died at Lin Sun's hands were innumerable, and it allowed him to easily discern the strengths of all the almighty figures in the battle. Truthfully speaking, even though the enemy had an advantage in numbers, no matter if it was to Lin Sun or Xia Ji, they couldn't be considered to be a threat. After all, they didn't even have a figure that was comparable to top big shots like Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi. So how could Lin Sun care about this? It wasn't that the enemy wasn't strong, but that Lin Sun and Xia Ji had long surpassed them on the boundless Dao path. Back then, Lin Sun traveled across the plains of the Ocean of Destiny alone, slaughtering top enemies like Du Feng and Wang Xinghai. Compared to the current situation, Lin Sun didn't pay any attention to them at all. That's right. Those who can reach the ruins of Myriad Dao aren't necessarily extremely powerful figures. For example, Ji Tianqing, Zish Chong, and Yi Wuhan are only in the lesser boundless realm. The reason why they have the opportunity to come to the ruins of Myriad Dao is because of the help of others. Lin Sun pondered, and in this mortal transformation, there can't be a small number of people like Ji Tianqing and the others. Moreover, this is only the first heaven realm of the 9 heavens of the spirit's realm. Those powerful and terrifying existences have probably left the mortal transformation a long time ago. If that's the case, I can't rule out the possibility that there are extremely powerful figures in this mortal transformation, but most of them are destined to not be that powerful. Of course, in Lin Sun's eyes, those who could be considered powerful were top figures like Tian Xingzi, Qi Qianji, Du Feng, and Wang Xinghai. Those who were below this standard might be very powerful to others. But to him and Xia Ji, they naturally couldn't be considered powerful. With such a judgment, Lin Sun became more and more relaxed. He took out the wine pot and drank while watching the battle. The imperial capital was still bustling, and people went about their own business. But in this world, it was already chaotic and turbulent. As the battle continued, 3 more opponents died tragically on the battlefield in a flash. At this time, Xia Ji was already in an absolute advantage. Looking at those opponents, all of them were shocked and angry, and their eyes were filled with fear and bewilderment. It was obvious that they had suffered a great blow. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun put away the wine pot, and his figure fluttered like the wind as he rushed over. It wasn't that Xia Ji couldn't hold on, but the enemies couldn't. Sure enough, just as Lin Sun made his move, those opponents chose to retreat at the same time, one more decisive than the other. But Lin Sun had already made his move. I knew it would be like this. He sneered and waved his sleeve. Clang, clang, clang. Sword chi roared all over the sky, and the momentum of the sword swept across the whole field. Suddenly, roars, explosions, screams, collisions, all kinds of sounds resounded like an overturning of the river and the sea. Unparalleled sword chi swept across, completely stirring up the world. In just a few breaths, except for the middle-aged scholar, all the enemies in the field were slaughtered. Some are killed by Lin Sun. Some are killed by Xie Ji. They cooperated with each other tacitly, just like a whirlwind sweeping away the rotten and withered the dry. When the battle was over and the turbulence calmed down, the middle-aged scholar, who was the only one left, was already ashen-faced and terrified. There was another chapter later. Chapter 3240. The middle-aged scholar's expression kept changing. It took him a long time to recover from the shock of death. When he looked at Lin Sun and Xie Ji again, his eyes were filled with uncontrollable fear. Lin Sun said with a smile, "You said that as long as I'm alive, you'll tell me some answers." The middle-aged scholar let out a long sigh and said, "We've overestimated ourselves. We're all subordinates of the Kuan Division's mandate lord. The reason why we're waiting here is because we're under orders." Lin Sun quickly understood the whole story through the middle-aged scholar's words. In the ruins of wonder, the absolute beginning ruler and the 9 divisions under him could be said to be the undisputed number 1 force. The so-called 9 divisions were the Qian, Kuan, Li, Zhen, Jin, Dui, Sun, and Central divisions. Each of the 9 divisions had a Tao master, and all of them could be said to be supreme experts. The experts of each division were known as the mandate messengers. The Tao masters of the 9 divisions and their respective mandate messengers all listened to the absolute beginning ruler's orders. However, since the absolute beginning ruler was trapped in the mystic god domain a long time ago, the experts of the 9 divisions under him all listened to a woman who called herself Black Crow. Black Crow was the first Tao servant under the absolute beginning ruler and the most trusted person of the absolute beginning ruler. Her cultivation was also unfathomable. It was said that Black Crow had reached the peak of the boundless realm a long time ago. In the entire ruins of wonder, she was a terrifying existence that could be feared by any expert. Some time ago, the middle-aged scholar and the others received an order from the Kuan Division's Tao Lord of Destiny, Qin Yangzi. The order was for the Kuan Division's Tao envoys to move out and guard the heaven and earth Tao veins in the 49 countries. It was to deal with Lin Sun. When Lin Sun heard this, he realized that the one who attacked him was the absolute beginning ruler, who was known as the mastermind behind the calamity of the era. Lin Sun asked, "How many mandate messengers like you are there in the mortal transformation realm?" Of the 9 divisions, only the Kuan Division's Tao Lord of Destiny is in charge of matters in the mortal transformation realm. In the mortal transformation realm, there are about 800 heavenly mandate envoys who are truly serving the Kuan Division. As the middle-aged scholar said this, a bitter look appeared on his face. Truth be told, we, the heaven's mandate envoys of the mortal transcendent realm, may seem numerous, but we're actually the most marginalized group of people in the 9 divisions of the absolute beginning realm. Lin Sun asked with interest, "What do you mean?" It's very simple. Since ancient times, anyone who came to the mortal transcendent realm from the Sea of Destiny would receive an invitation from the cultivators of the Kuan tribe. They promised that if they were in the same camp, they would receive the protection of the absolute beginning ruler. Even if they were to encounter any danger, they would receive the help of the absolute beginning ruler. The middle-aged scholar said, "Fellow Taoist, I presume you're clearly aware that the ruins of Tao are filled with unfathomable dangers. We came here for the sake of firstly avoiding the threat of the grand silence lifespan tribulation, and secondly, for the sake of obtaining the chaotic Tao fruit. But if I act alone, I'm bound to be weak and easily encounter mishaps." Lin Sun said, "So many of our fellow Taoists who entered the mortal transformation realm chose to join the absolute beginning ruler's camp." "That's right," the middle-aged scholar said. "However, because the great Tao competition is a test of one's cultivation. People like us who belong to the Kuan division have almost no chance of entering the Heaven Gate and leaving the mortal transcendent realm. As a result, we are the least valued group of people in the 9 divisions of the absolute beginning era. Lin Sun finally understood. There were 9 levels of heaven in the realm of spirits. Each level had its own gate, and each gate had its own mystery. The mortal transformation realm was the first level of the realm of spirits. If one couldn't enter the gate of heaven, it meant that they could only be trapped in the mortal transformation realm. If they couldn't even pass the first level of heaven, the middle-aged scholar and the other Kuan tribe's destined messengers obviously wouldn't be valued too much. And this also meant that although the middle-aged scholar and the other Kuan tribe's destined messengers seemed to have the advantage in numbers, they were actually no different from a plate of loose sand. Lin Sun said, "It's good to stick together for warmth. If you choose the wrong camp, you'll harm yourself instead." The middle-aged scholar's expression was gloomy as he said, "We've been cultivating for so long and experienced the vicissitudes of life and death. It wasn't easy for us to come to the ruins of wonderful Tao. Who would have thought that this place isn't a pure land? We can only blame ourselves for being too weak. If we don't stick together for warmth, I'm afraid we won't be able to stand in this world." His voice was full of loneliness and disappointment. If they didn't come to the ruins of wonderful Tao, they would be threatened by the great silence, lifeless tribulation, and wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well. And coming to the ruins of wonderful Tao was also full of danger. If they had known about this earlier, perhaps the powerful figures scattered across the mortal transcendent realm wouldn't have been so eager to enter the ruins of myriad Taos in the past. "You can go." Lin Sun waved his hand. The middle-aged scholar was stunned. He was already prepared to die. Who would have thought that Lin Sun actually intended to let him go? After a while, he took a deep breath and cupped his hands. "Thank you." Only then did he turn around and leave. However, he was still in a trance. In the past hundreds of years, he had heard many things related to Lin Sun. Those things all described Lin Sun as ruthless and bloodthirsty. He thought that Lin Sun was a ruthless person like a demon god. But now he survived. "Why didn't you kill him?" Xia Ji was a little surprised. "He's just a pitiful person. Why kill him?" Lin Sun said softly. Strictly speaking, a person like the middle-aged scholar couldn't be considered an enemy. At most, he was an unvalued chess piece of the absolute beginning ruler. This time, Lin Sun didn't let the middle-aged scholar go because he was soft-hearted. Instead, he wanted to use the middle-aged scholar's mouth to spread today's news. In this way, if the Kuan heavenly mandate messengers in the mortal transformation realm still insisted on dealing with him, they would have to consider the consequences. However, in Lin Sun's opinion, these unvalued characters were like a plate of loose sand. After learning this news, most of them would probably not work for the absolute beginning ruler like before. This was what Lin Sun wanted to see. "Strange. We've killed so many opponents and experienced a great Tao struggle. But why hasn't there been much change on this Tao Karma Jade archive?" Xia Ji frowned. Her attention had already shifted to her own Tao Karma Jade archive. Lin Sun was stunned. He looked at his own Tao Karma Jade archive. There were no changes. He couldn't help but say, "It seems that this great Tao struggle is also very particular. Opponents that are too weak won't be of much use." In order to pass the heavenly gate of the first heaven, one had to attract the Chaos Tao fruit. In order to attract the Chaos Tao fruit, one's Tao karma had to be included in the heavenly cycle Tao law. In the end, the first step was still to fight for the great Tao. Only then could one's Tao karma be included in the heavenly cycle Tao law. Based on the Tao Karma Jade archive alone, there were more than 10,000 mighty figures scattered across the mortal transcendent realm. If they were to engage in an ordinary struggle for the great Tao, they would be able to include their Tao karma in the heavenly cycle rules. Then, people like the middle-aged scholar wouldn't have been trapped for so long. In the end, the great Tao struggle required one's own Tao to be strong enough, and the opponent had to be strong enough. Fortunately, there were 2 ways to fight for the great Tao. One was to fight with other powerful figures. The other was to fight with the Tao Karma Dharma that had long gone through the heavenly gate and left their Tao Karma in the heavenly cycle Tao law. This also meant that even if there were no opponents in the world, they could still fight with the Tao Karma Dharma. There would always be a chance. And in the Qing Kingdom's imperial capital, there were 3 kinds of Tao Karma Dharma. They were a jade seal deep in the palace, a bronze furnace in front of a Taoist temple in the imperial city, and an ancient tree outside the imperial city's east gate. Let's go and have a look at the jade seal in the Qing Kingdom's imperial palace. Lin Sun made a decision. He immediately moved through the void with Xia Ji and flew into the depths of the imperial palace. For ordinary people, the imperial palace was the most supreme forbidden place. The true dragon son of heaven sat in it and ruled over the world. The imperial power was like the existence of heaven. But in Lin Sun's eyes, it was not worth mentioning at all. So what if he was an emperor? In the end, he couldn't escape the predicament of birth, old age, sickness, and death. In the depths of the imperial palace, in a splendid palace, Lin Sun saw the jade seal transformed by the Tao Karma Dharma. The jade seal was square and fist-sized. It was purple and engraved with mountains, rivers, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Its aura was thick and boundless, with infinite majesty. Lin Sun recognized at a glance that the aura on the jade seal was the same as the power of the heavenly cycle Tao law that covered the imperial city. It seems that this Tao Karma Dharma was left by an extraordinary existence. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Xia Ji suddenly said, "Lin Sun, I have a hunch that if I defeat this jade seal, I can include my Tao Karma in the heavenly cycle Tao law, attract the fruit of chaos, and go through the heavenly gate." Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he quickly said, "Don't do it." "Why?" Xia Ji was confused. "If you leave suddenly, what should I do?" Lin Sun said impatiently. This girl was too heartless. Xia Ji nodded and came to a realization. But soon, she frowned and said, "But how can we leave together? I'm afraid we can't leave together. But before we leave, we could discuss our next step." Lin Sun said, "Leaving the mortal transformation realm would mean entering the second heaven of the spirit's realm, the calamity realm." But now, they knew nothing about the calamity realm. Naturally, they had to learn about it in advance and be prepared. "Then what do you think we should do next?" Xia Ji said, "Let's gather information first." Lin Sun thought, since the Kuan emissaries could receive orders from their leader, Qin Yangzi, it proves that information about other realms can also be transmitted to the mortal transformation realm. Now, the news of my appearance in the mortal transformation realm should have spread. I believe there will be many people coming to find me in the next period of time. Speaking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but think of his master, the master of the heart core, Golden Cicada, Chen Linkong, and the others. He also thought of the traversing sword gorge, Fu Nanli, and other old antiques who had arrived in the ruins of Tao many years before him. When these people learned that he had arrived in the mortal transformation realm, how could they remain indifferent? More updates for you. Chapter 32-41. In the mysterious world of darkness in the mysterious God realm, 10 scarlet moons hung in the sky, sprinkling a viscous scarlet rain of light. The world was dark red, and on top of an ancient black tree, a girl in black was sitting. Her slender legs were swaying in the air, and her white and delicate feet were glowing with a faint luster. Her snow-white hair hung down, and her face had an extremely bewitching beauty. Her ruby-like eyes were clear and cold. The rain of light from the 10 scarlet moons seemed to be attracted by something, and it surged toward the girl in black, adding a frightening and mysterious aura to her graceful figure. "Miss, the Kuan Division's Destiny Pathmaster, Qin Yangzi, has just sent news that the young man called Lin Sun has appeared in the Qin Kingdom in the mortal transformation world." Suddenly, a gust of cold wind rose in this desolate and blood-red world, and an old ape, who was as tall as a mountain, with 2 swords on his back, appeared out of nowhere. He bowed and spoke. On top of the ancient black tree, the girl in black's eyes brightened, and she said, "He has finally come. Ancestor Ape, has Qin Yangzi made any moves?" The old ape with two swords on his back bowed and said, Qing Yangzi has ordered the destiny emissaries distributed in the mortal transformation world to take action. If there is any new news, he will report to you immediately. After a pause, the old ape said, Also, Qing Yangzi asked me to ask Miss, do you have any other instructions? The girl in black was about to say something, but she fell silent again and said, I'm just bringing the sect master's words to them. As for what they do, that's their business. Remember, in the future, there's no need to ask for my opinion on the Destiny Pathmaster's actions. The old ape said, Yes. The girl in black waved her hand and said, Go. A gust of cold wind blew, and the old ape's figure disappeared into thin air. Forget it. I'll go see the sect master again. After thinking for a moment, the girl in black's figure swayed, and she turned into a crow with pitch-black feathers. She flapped her wings and soared into the sky. In the boundless world of primal chaos, Black Crow stood on the branch, and her heart was filled with anxiety. She had already told him about Lin Sun's appearance in the mortal transformation world, but she did not receive any response. Just as Hei was feeling slightly terrified, a voice finally rang out. From today onwards, you will stay here. You are not allowed to take a single step out, nor are you allowed to contact anyone else. His voice was indifferent and calm. Black Crow's body stiffened, and her scarlet eyes widened. She really wanted to ask why, but because of an indescribable fear, she didn't dare to ask. A moment later, the Primordium Sovereign's voice rang out once more. I told you I want to see how many obstacles this variable can overcome and how many changes it will cause. I don't want you to think you're smart enough to deal with him. Black Crow said in a low voice, Hierarch, I didn't order others to deal with Lin Sun. Little Crow, the ape ancestor has been by your side for countless eras. How could I not know what you're thinking? If you don't say it, can you not do it? The Primordium Hegemon's voice was filled with coldness. When all of their opponents are biding their time, whoever jumps out first will be at a disadvantage. Like a child who had done something wrong, Black Crow lowered her head in silence. She couldn't read the Primordium Sovereign's mind. She just wanted to do something. But clearly, in the Primordium Sovereign's eyes, doing something now was a mistake. As long as one is cautious, one will not fail. I've been trapped here for countless eras, but I'm not worried yet. The Primordium Sovereign murmured, When the time comes to decide the victor, there are only one or two people in the entire ruins of wonders that are worthy of my attention. Black Crow said, Hierarch, I only have one question. Speak. What if Lin Sun passes the Nine Stacks door, crosses the immortal slaying road, and arrives at the mystic god realm? To me, this is a blessing. I don't understand. Just wait here and watch, Yi Zichen said. Dao brother, your little disciple is here. Do you want to meet him? In a hidden realm, Golden Cicada spoke softly. Du So had just arrived and told him about Lin Sun's appearance in the mortal transformation realm. There's no hurry. It's not time yet. The core master shook his head. Golden Cicada muttered, but the Primordium Sovereign's subordinates can't wait any longer. As long as the Primordium Sovereign can wait, we can't move. At this point, the Master of the Heart Core sighed with emotion. A single pull activates the whole body. Wind and rain are like night. Golden Cicada smiled. Then let's wait a little longer. But I'm afraid Do So and the others won't wait. It's fine, the Core Master said. Only when there's a great change will there be a great battle. A few days passed quickly. Lin Sun and Xia Ji had been waiting for their enemies to come, waiting for their friends to come. At this moment, they were sitting in a rather large tea house in the Qing Kingdom's capital, listening to the storyteller's vivid story in a leisurely manner. Outside the royal city, over the past few days, many powerful figures had appeared. Some had come from other cities in the Qing Kingdom, while others had come from other countries in the mortal transformation realm. At this moment, a few hundred cultivators had gathered in the heavens and the earth outside the imperial city. However, no matter who they were, they all chose to stay outside the royal city. They had no intention of entering the royal city. In the end, these old guys were just here to watch the show. Ever since the news spread a few days ago that Lin Sun, the heir of the core master, had killed a group of heavenly messengers in the Qing kingdom's capital. All the cultivators in the mortal transformation realm were shocked. Lin Sun, who didn't know his name, for hundreds of years, the sensational things he had done in the Sea of Destiny had spread throughout the mortal transformation realm and caused a sensation. Now, such a legendary young man had come to the Qing kingdom's capital after crossing the Sea of Destiny. It was hard not to attract attention. An old man sitting on the clouds couldn't help but look at his jade archive. In the jade archive, the powerful figures scattered all over the mortal transformation realm were like countless light spots. If one looked closely, one could see that many of the light spots were moving toward the Qing kingdom from different directions. It was foreseeable that as time went on, more and more powerful figures would come to the Qing kingdom's capital. Realizing this, the old man couldn't help but be shocked. Lin Sun was in big trouble after being targeted by the power of the Taichu dominator. I've long heard that Lin Sun is an unpredictable variable. His arrival will probably set off a storm in the ruins of Wonderful Tao. Someone whispered in the nearby area. I don't know if he will set off a storm. What I'm curious about now is whether he can survive in the mortal transformation realm. Outside the royal city, people were talking about it everywhere. Those powerful figures were either in groups of 3 or 5 or walking alone. They were originally competitors, but at this time, they all chose to bide their time. Suddenly, someone said in surprise, "Isn't the Xinjiang Gorge and Fu Nanli?" In the void, not far away, 2 figures appeared out of thin air. Without delay, they rushed straight toward the royal city. It's indeed them. They are the respective successors of the Yuan Church's Yuan Shu and the Spirit Church's Shuyin. It's said that they have a close relationship with Lin Sun. They must have come in a hurry to help. In the midst of the discussion, a deep voice suddenly sounded. Help? In my opinion, it's suicide. Everyone, please take a look at the Tao Karma Jade archives in your hands. Nearly 200 of the heavenly mandate envoys belonging to the Kuan tribe have gathered and have arrived at the border of the kingdom of Qing. In less than a day, such a terrifying force will come for us. As soon as this was said, everyone took out their Tao Karma Jade archives and couldn't help but gasp. Indeed, there were more than 300 powerful figures, auras, gathered together and appeared at the border of the kingdom of Qing. It was extremely conspicuous. Someone couldn't help but ask. In such a situation, if it were anyone else, they would have fled long ago. But why do you think Lin Sun hasn't left the royal city? Everyone looked at each other. Yes, why didn't Lin Sun flee? At the same time, in a tea house in the royal city, Lin Sun suddenly sensed something. He got up and walked out of the tea house. Immediately, he saw Xinjiang Gorge and Fu Nanli teleporting over from afar. Seniors, it's nice to see you again. Lin Sun greeted them with a smile. Xinjiang Gorge and Fu Nanli also smiled. After learning that you were in the royal city of the kingdom of Qing, we immediately set off. Fortunately, we're not too late, Xinjiang Gorge said. The royal city of the kingdom of Qing has become a place where the whole world pays attention to. We shouldn't stay for long. It's better for us to leave this place immediately. Fu Nanli's smile faded, and his expression was grim. Yes, the heavenly mandate envoys scattered throughout the mortal transformation realm are already rushing over. We must leave as soon as possible. Xinjiang Gorge's expression also turned serious. Lin Sun said with a smile, I've already discerned some clues from the Taoism Jade archives that the 2 seniors mentioned. However, besides waiting for you, I'm also waiting for their arrival. I'm a little unwilling to leave at this time. Fu Nanli was shocked and said, You plan to fight them? Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, There are 800 heavenly mandate envoys in the mortal transformation realm, but only 300 have arrived. It seems that they have the advantage in numbers, but in reality, they're just a motley crew. They're not much of a threat at all. After a pause, he continued, Moreover, even if I escape now, they can still track my whereabouts from the Tao Karma Jade archives. Instead of being constantly chased by them, it's better to defeat them in one fell swoop in the royal city of the kingdom of Qing to avoid future troubles. This, Xinjiang Gorge and Fu Nanli were both shocked by Lin Sun's decision. But when they thought about it carefully, with Lin Sun's current combat strength, he could defeat top experts like Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi. If ordinary opponents came, it would indeed be no different from moths flying into a flame. In other words, for Lin Sun, it was difficult to rely on numbers alone to threaten Lin Sun. Even if Lin Sun couldn't defeat these 300 heavenly mandate envoys, no one could stop him if he wanted to escape. Before Xinjiang Gorge and Fu Nanli could come back to their senses, Lin Sun had already changed the topic. He smiled and took out a pot of old wine. He said, "Seniors, you've come at the right time. I've just arrived here and have a lot of things to ask you. Why don't we talk while drinking?" Chapter 3242. In the tea house, the storyteller spoke eloquently. Xia Ji listened with great interest. On the other side, Lin Sun, Xing Jiangorge, and Fu Nanli were chatting and drinking. They talked about many things related to the mortal transformation. They also talked about many things related to their old friends. For example, the Mountain Wind Owl Lord, Xiaohe, Mo Bays, Mu Changyun, and the others were currently cultivating in a place called the Sangrama Nation. The mortal transformation was located in the ruins of myriad paths, after all. There were tens of thousands of Boundless Realm cultivators. Although most of them were trapped here, they were not afraid of the threat of the great silence, lifeless tribulation when they meditated. For many of them, it was not a bad thing to stay in the mortal transformation for a long time. From Xing Jiangorge and Fu Nanli, Lin Sun learned that top powerhouses like Yi Wuyin, Qi Qianji, Tian Xingzi, and Guan Qinxiu had obtained a Chaos Dao fruit in the Great Dao competition and ascended the Heavenly Gate. This was within reason, so Lin Sun did not find it strange. After all, Yi Wuyin, Qi Qianji, and the others had had numerous opportunities to come to the ruins of Dao a very long time ago. And the reason they'd stayed here for so long was none other than because they'd given up the opportunities they'd fought for to the other cultivators in their respective camps. Just like Lin Sun, he was the last one to come to the ruins of myriad paths. Lin Sun. When I came, I received a message from my master, Xing Jiangorge suddenly said. Xing Jiangorge suddenly said, "Do you want to know what is written in that decree?" Xing Jiangorge's master was the founder of the Yuan sect, Yuan Chu. "It should be related to me," Lin Sun said with a smile. Xing Jiangorge laughed. "That's right. According to my master, your master, the core lord, also knows that you have arrived at the ruins of myriad paths." Then he told Lin Sun about the situation in the ruins of myriad paths. For example, the absolute beginning ruler being trapped by the sword shackles, the strength of the 9 divisions of absolute beginning, the core lord, golden cicada, and the others. After hearing this, Lin Sun realized that his arrival had become a variable. However, whether it was the absolute beginning ruler or his master, the core lord, they all chose to bide their time. It seemed that they all wanted to see how big of a storm they, the variable, would cause. At the same time, Lin Sun also learned that in the endless years, only a small group of people could really pass through the 9 Heavens Gate and step on the immortal slaying road to arrive at the mysterious God realm. Among this small group of people, they were virtually all horrifying existences closest to the grand completion boundless realm, or had already stepped into the grand completion boundless realm. Those who approached the great circle of the boundless realm were called Boundless Dao Lord. Those who stepped foot into the great circle of the boundless realm were called Boundless Dominators. For example, the Origin Sect's founding ancestor Yuan Chu, the Spirit Sect's founding ancestor Suyin, the Shaman Sect's founding ancestor Tian Wu, the Diana Sect's founding ancestor Shur, and the 9 heavenly mandate Dao Lords of the 9 divisions of Taichu were figures at the level of the Boundless Dao Lord. On the other hand, figures that had stepped foot into the perfection stage of the boundless realm like the Golden Cicada, the Core Master, the number 1 attendant under Taichu, Taichu's old servant, Ape Ancestor, and so on and so forth could be called Boundless Dominators. Knowing this, Lin Sun suddenly realized a problem. Early on in the Sea of Destiny, according to what Fu Nanli said, since ancient times until now, there were only 3 people that could definitely step foot into the perfection stage of the boundless realm. They were that mysterious swordsman, Chun Shi, and the absolute beginning ruler. But now it was obviously different. Lin Sun asked this question. The answer of the Sword Gorge was very simple. Many of those figures that had stepped foot into the perfection stage of the boundless realm had attained the perfection stage of the boundless realm after arriving at the ruins of Myriad Dao. The reason was that the ruins of Myriad Dao had great fortuitous encounters that were sufficient to allow the boundless Dao Lord to step into the level of the boundless Dominator. And such fortuitous encounters were usually related to the Chaos Dao fruit. At this point, Lin Sun came to a sudden understanding. Right? According to legend, the ruins of Myriad Dao was a place of fortuitous encounters that were sufficient to allow boundless realm figures to break through. The reason why he hadn't heard of it in the past was that no one had arrived at the ruins of Myriad Dao. To put it simply, in endless years, the small group of people that could enter the mysterious God realm were either the boundless Dao Lord or the boundless Dominator. On the other hand, most of the other boundless realm figures have been trapped in the 9 levels of the divine realm for countless years. This caused Lin Sun to realize that even top figures that were formidable like Qi Qianji and Yi Wuyin would probably be unable to enter the mysterious God realm in a short period of time. The Sword Gorge said, "Master asked me to tell you that the core forces of the 9 divisions of Tai Chu are distributed in the 9th level of heaven, the world of heaven, and it's extremely likely to be a calamity of slaughter. If you have the chance to arrive there in the future, you could go get in contact with Do So first." Lin Sun was surprised. Do So was actually in the 9th level of heaven, the world of heaven. He hadn't seen this old man that had once lived in seclusion in the moon's Embrace Star's Embrace Moon residence for a very long time. Subsequently, Lin Sun asked about some things related to the Calamity Realm of the 2nd level. Xing's Sword Gorge had an understanding of these things, and he spoke without reserve. The so-called Calamity Realm was a realm of calamity. But anyone that entered this world would encounter 3 calamities. The first was called the Test of Rebirth, the second was called the Test of Dao Building, and the last was called the Test of Heart Knocking. Only by passing through these 3 trials would one be able to attract the fruit of chaos and pass through the 2nd level of heaven. For countless years, there had been many mighty figures in the 9th level of heaven in the realm of spirits who had entered the Calamity Realm. However, some were trapped before the rebirth barrier, some were trapped before the Dao building barrier, and some were hindered by the heart-knocking barrier. Lin Sun felt much more at ease after understanding this information. He glanced at Xia Ji, who was not far away, and thought to himself, in this case, if Xia Ji enters the Calamity Realm ahead of time, I only need to ask her to wait for me before the rebirth barrier. The enemy is approaching the Imperial City. Suddenly, Fu Nanli spoke with a solemn expression. He had been paying attention to his jade archive of Dao Karma. At this moment, he discovered that the auras of the 300 or so emissaries of destiny were like dark clouds that had arrived before the south gate of the Imperial City. Xing's Sword Gorge's pupils constricted, and he looked at Lin Sun. "Do you really want to fight?" Lin Sun drank the wine in the pot in one gulp, and then he said with a smile, "Seniors, please sit here and watch the show." As he spoke, he stood up and walked out of the tea house. Xia Ji, who had been listening to the storyteller, appeared beside Lin Sun almost at the same time. Looking at the back of the young man and woman, Fu Nanli could not help but ask, "Old Xing, can you still sit?" "Yes, I can." Xing's Sword Gorge's face was full of expectation, and he said leisurely, "In the sea of fate, who doesn't know how powerful our young friend Lin is? Although the enemy this time is large in number, as Lin Sun said, they are just a motley crew." After a pause, his eyes glowed with divine light. "In fact, I'm looking forward to this battle. I'll let those old fellows in the mortal transformation see who they can provoke and who they can't." Fu Nanli had already stood up, but after hearing this, he sat back down and said with a smile, "Then let's just watch the battle today." Xing's Sword Gorge said in a self-mocking tone, "When we were in the Sea of Fate, as long as Lin Sun was around, we would always watch the battle." Fu Nanli laughed and said, "Alas, back then, I felt that it was a little hurtful to my pride. But now I've accepted it." While they were talking, Lin Sun and Xia Ji had already risen to the sky and stood under the clouds, looking at the south together. Outside the imperial city, thunder and lightning were raging, and dark clouds were majestic. The surging murderous spirit disturbed the world. Looking carefully in the void far away, hundreds of horrible breaths gathered together, as if gods were running amok in the sky. Later, I'll attack first, Lin Sun said softly. He put his hands behind his back, and his moon-white clothes fluttered in the wind. Xia Ji thought for a while, and then reluctantly said, "Then I'll let you do it this time." Lin Sun was speechless. What was there to fight for? At the same time, outside the imperial city, when more than 300 messengers of destiny arrived, the powerful figures distributed in various areas were alarmed. They all stayed far away, and their minds were in turmoil. How powerful this lineup was. Looking at the whole mortal transformation, perhaps no one could resist such a lineup. It was too frightening. How could Lin Sun resist it? At this moment, many people had the same thought. Boom! As the world shook, more than 300 messengers of destiny did not stop. They directly moved through the void and killed their way into the imperial city. At this moment, all the people distributed outside the imperial city rose to the sky and watched from afar. What made them feel incredulous was that not only did Lin Sun not escape, but he also stood in the void, as if he had been waiting for this battle. Such a scene also surprised the more than 300 messengers of destiny. Immediately after, their bodies burst out with killing intent that pierced through the 9 heavens and 10 earths, and they directly attacked. Rumble, rumble, the sky seemed to collapse all of a sudden, falling into chaos and collapse. The dazzling divine brilliance of the great Tao illuminated the mountains and rivers of the universe, and it was dazzling. More than 300 messengers of destiny, each of them had the cultivation of the boundless realm. When they attacked together, the divine might of the great Tao that each of them reflected gathered together. That shocking scene could make other people in the same realm despair and collapse. Kill! The sky fell and the earth cracked, and the killing intent filled the field. Various supreme divine abilities seemed to be like a torrent of the great Tao that filled the heavens and the earth, and they were mixed with a dense expanse of eternal Tao soldiers as they swept out together. Merely looking at it from afar caused the great figures outside the imperial city to break out in cold sweat, and their hearts trembled. But right at this moment, a sword howl suddenly sounded out. At the beginning, it was low and inaudible, and then it became impassioned and ostentatious. In the end, the heavens and the earth were filled with the clear and melodious sword howl, and it shook one's heart and blood to the point one's blood roiled and one's mind shook. After that, a bloody scene that was bound to be unforgettable to all the great figures outside the imperial city appeared. Lin Sun's figure transformed into a strand of sword chi that charged forward. In the blink of an eye, he easily tore apart the various divine abilities and eternal Tao soldiers that came towards him, and he pierced forward like a hot knife through butter. Bang! 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 Countless supreme divine abilities collapsed like bubbles, and countless eternal Tao soldiers were blasted flying in all directions. The dense sounds of collisions and explosions reverberated without end. The wisp of sword chi that Lin Sun's figure transformed and had been charging forward all along, it was all-conquering and all-conquering. After it tore apart the attacks of the enemy, it was like a peerlessly sharp blade that forcefully pierced into the enemy army. After that, it set off a path of blood. Those exceedingly formidable, boundless realm existences were like paper at this moment, and they were crushed by that wisp of dazzling, fierce, and overbearing sword chi, causing countless rays of blood to spray out. When looked at from afar, the sword chi that charged forward ceaselessly just happened to be like a waving brush that pierced through the sky and drew out a long line of blood within the enemy army. Chapter 32:43. A line of blood streaked across the army, formed by over 300 heavenly mandate envoys, also taking away the lives of close to 30 boundless rel powerhouses. Their bodies and primordial spirits were crushed and dispersed into ashes. That attack was too terrifying. It was deathly silent outside the capital. Lin Sun's figure was like sword chi, invincible and unstoppable. When his figure stabilized, the enemy army was already in chaos. Everyone was dumbfounded, trembling all over, unable to recover from the bloody scene of death for a long time. One attack defeated the group of enemies and carved out a bloody path. Those who fell were all powerhouses who had stepped into the boundless realm. Each of their cultivation was unparalleled, but under Lin Sun's hands, they were as weak as paper. Who dared to believe this? Before this, everyone was still wondering how Lin Sun was going to escape this monstrous killing calamity, and in the end, such a scene played out. One could imagine how great the shock caused was. In the tea house of the capital, Xingjian Gorge and Fu Nanli were both stunned. They suddenly realized that the cultivation that Lin Sun possessed now was far more powerful and terrifying than when they first saw him. Facing a group of the same realm, he had the grace of sweeping through invincible. The two of them did not know that back then in the Sea of Destiny, Lin Sun had already proven his way to the middle stage of the boundless realm. He had realized 10,000 Tao as one, 10,000 Dharma as one, and all things as one. His cultivation had long undergone earth-shattering changes. Right now, he looked like he was barehanded, but his body had already integrated the power of the 5 great Taoist bodies, and he had also completely integrated the power of the abyssal sword cauldron into his body. Therefore, the power of each move was far from what ordinary people of the same realm could withstand. Under the sky, the atmosphere was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. The expressions of those heavenly mandate envoys all changed, their hearts in turmoil, completely shocked by this attack. Before coming, they had already learned that Lin Sun had killed over 10 heavenly mandate envoys in the land of the Qing Kingdom's capital. This created a great pressure on them. They had originally thought that with over 300 people joining forces, it would be enough to compete with Lin Sun. But looking at it now, in the end, they had still underestimated Lin Sun's terror. Such an opponent was no longer someone who could be resisted with strength in numbers. At the same time, Lin Sun looked back at those opponents and said, "Do you still want to continue?" His words caused the hearts of the enemies to tremble. They looked at each other in dismay, but no one said anything. Seeing this, Lin Sun said casually, "If anyone is still here after 3 breaths, he will be my enemy." Crash, as soon as he finished speaking, his opponents scattered like birds and beasts, each of them fleeing faster than anyone else. In less than 3 breaths of time, there wasn't a single opponent left. Lin Sun thought to himself that they were indeed a motley crew. With a single strike, he could destroy his opponent's fighting spirit and defeat him. Outside the imperial city, when they witnessed this scene, all the Almighties were shocked speechless. A sword swept across the sky, carving a bloody path and scaring away the enemies. Such elegance was simply like the ruler of this realm, and no one could rival him. "Everyone, it's not fun to watch. Let's all leave." Lin Sun's indifferent voice resounded outside the imperial capital. Very soon, the mighty figures who came from all directions left one after another with complicated emotions. It was also on this day that the news of Lin Sun repelling the enemy with a single strike spread. In an extremely short period of time, it shocked the entire mortal transformation, causing a huge uproar. Everyone knew that from this day onward, the entire mortal transformation realm would be doomed. No one would dare to be Lin Sun's enemy, let alone compete with him on the Great Way. In a tea house in the imperial capital, looking at Lin's relaxed manner, Xingjian Gorge and Fu Nanli sighed with emotion in their hearts. Similarly boundless realm cultivation, but experiencing this battle made them deeply realize that they and Lin Sun were no longer people of the same world long ago. The difference was too great. After staying in the imperial capital for a few more days, Fu Nanli and Xingjian Gorge left. This was the mortal transcendent realm, and they needed to make preparations for the great Tao struggle. Lin Sun and Xia Ji once again arrived at the hall in the depths of the palace. Remember, after we arrive at the Calamity Realm, you must wait for me at the Rebirth Pass. Lin Sun couldn't help but exhort again. Lin Sun, I'm not a child anymore. Summer Solstice complained, which was rare. Lin Sun smiled and teased. I forgot that your cultivation is not weaker than the Eternal Night Emperor at that time. All right, I'll pay attention in the future and try to change. Xia Ji shook her head and grabbed Lin Sun's hand with her slender, white hand. Her voice was melodious. There's no need to change. I like this feeling. Xia Ji's fingers were soft and cool. Lin Sun couldn't help but grab it tightly. Feeling the warmth of her palm, his voice also became gentle. When the matter in the ruins of wonderful Tao is settled, I'll bring you back to the ruins of fortune and marry you in a grand manner. That's what you said. A bright smile appeared on Xia Ji's beautiful face, and a pair of crescent-like, clear eyes curved. She would never conceal the joy in her heart in front of Lin Sun. Lin Sun couldn't help but kiss her forehead lightly. Then, he took a deep breath and said, "Go." Xia Ji grunted and turned to look at the jade seal. The jade seal was square and the size of a fist. It was heavy and towering, and it was engraved with mountains and rivers, the sun, moon, and stars. Its aura was extremely powerful. When Xia Ji's aura swept over, the jade seal suddenly glowed, and a figure appeared. This person stood in the starry sky while stepping on the sun and moon. His body was covered with a layer of dark silver armor, and his face was handsome and cold. He held a golden halberd in his hand. Every breath he took caused the stars to tremble, and he was like a legendary supreme god of war. When this person appeared, Lin Sun's Tao Jade archive suddenly trembled, and the origin of this person appeared. Evolution Jioha. He was known as the brilliant void god of war. 390,000 years ago, he attracted the fruit of chaos and stepped into the first gate of heaven. His Tao power was ranked 204th in the heavenly cycle rules. This was already an extremely shocking ranking. It should be known that since ancient times, only 1,614 people were able to include their Tao power in the heavenly cycle rules. Clang! As soon as Yin Jua's figure appeared, he waved the golden halberd in his hand and slashed at Xia Ji. At that moment, it seemed as if a myriad of stars in the heavenly cycle were slashed down, and the scene was shocking and boundlessly terrifying. At this moment, although Yin Jioha was formed by Tao, it was already a kind of heavenly cycle rules, so its power was naturally extraordinary. Almost at the same time, Xia Ji also moved. In her slender white palm, the white bone spear pierced out, just like a mighty river of fate rushing out. The war broke out completely. Lin Sun stood in the distance and watched for a moment, and then relaxed. There was no doubt that Yin Jioha, who was known as the brilliant void god of war, was extremely powerful, and he was slightly better than the top figures, such as Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi. But compared with Xia Ji, it was not enough. Yin Jioha didn't lose in terms of cultivation, but in terms of the Great Way rules he mastered. After all, whether it was the power of fate, cause and effect, or time, they were too taboo and supreme, and the power they released was also beyond imagination. In less than a quarter of an hour, boom, the white bone spear in Xia Ji's hand suddenly slashed down from the sky, smashing Yin Jioha's Tao power, and a rain of light scattered like a waterfall. Then, under Lin Sun's shocked gaze, an obscure and indescribable power of rules emerged, and it bathed Xia Ji's graceful figure in it. It was dazzling and extremely gorgeous. This is the power of the chaotic Tao fruit. Lin Sun was shocked. The chaotic Tao fruit was a type of innate chaotic rule born in the ruins of Tao, and it was unimaginably powerful. According to legend, the more chaotic rule one mastered, the more transformation one could achieve in the boundless realm, and it was more likely for one to achieve true transcendence in the boundless realm. Now Lin Sun already knew that the boundless Taoist Lord and the boundless Dominator had practically refined numerous chaotic Tao fruits in the ruins of Tao, and that was why they possessed their current cultivation. Undoubtedly, the Tao karma that Xia Ji obtained by defeating Yin Jioha had drawn over a chaotic Tao fruit, and this was undoubtedly equivalent to obtaining a supreme fortune. Under Lin Sun's gaze, Xia Zhi's aura was realizing a miraculous change, and it was rising rapidly like a stream after a rain. In just a few breaths of time, the power of the Great Way in her body was much stronger than before. Lin Sun couldn't help but be tempted by this. Buzz! Suddenly, a mysterious door appeared in the void, and it seemed to stand in the boundless and distant universe, giving off a feeling that it was unreachable. The gate of heaven had appeared. Then, Xia Zhi's graceful figure suddenly turned into a beam of light and rushed into the gate of heaven. Everything happened too quickly, and Lin Sun didn't even have time to say a few words. On that day, in the sky above the Qing Kingdom's imperial capital, the heavenly cycle rule formed by the power of Yin Jua's Tao karma disappeared, and a new rule power rose. This rule power was like a torrent of fate, and it surged through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Not long after it coiled in the sky above the imperial capital, it began to spread toward other places in the Qing Kingdom, as if it was attacking cities and pillaging strongholds. Such a scene shocked all the powerful beings scattered across the mortal transformation realm. In their respective Tao, Karma, Jade archives, a mysterious and powerful energy of the heavenly cycle was displayed. And in the palace hall deep in the Qing Kingdom's imperial palace, a Tao Karma Dharma appeared. It was a ball of light, and in the light and shadow was a boundless ocean of fate, majestic, obscure, and boundless. This was naturally the Tao Karma power that Xia Zhi had left behind. In the southwest region of the Qing Kingdom's imperial capital, a Taoist temple stood there, and incense was at its peak. In the past, there was a bustling crowd of good men and women who came to burn incense and worship, and it was very lively. At this moment, Lin Sun's figure appeared in front of this Taoist temple. His gaze was fixed on a copper furnace. This copper furnace was simple and powerful, and it stood on 3 legs. Torrential flames of the way burned inside, and mysterious flame totems appeared on the 4 walls of the furnace. This was also a Tao Karma Dharma, and it was left behind by a great power who had left the mortal transformation realm. It represented a power of the heavenly cycle rule. However, under Lin Sun's observation, he could clearly feel that the aura of this copper furnace was far less powerful than the aura of the jade seal that Yin Jua had left behind. I wonder if defeating this Dharma will allow me to attract the fruit of the way of chaos. Lin Sun thought about it and finally decided to give it a try. Chapter 32:44. The bronze cauldron rumbled and turned into a bearded man. He was thousands of feet tall, and his skin that seemed to be made of divine gold burned with violent and terrifying red divine flames. As soon as he appeared, he looked like a god that could incinerate the heavens. Heng Xiao. He was known as the world-burning fire god. He left the mortal transformation 260,000 years ago and was ranked 519th in the heavenly cycle Tao law. Lin Sun's Tao Karma Jade archive reflected some information about him. As expected, this guy is far from being as powerful as Yin Jia. However, he can be considered a mid-tier figure among the heavenly cycle Tao laws. Lin Sun thought. Go! The bearded man, Heng Xiao, shouted and punched at Lin Sun. Feeling the power of the punch, Lin Sun could tell that Heng Xiao's cultivation was only slightly stronger than Yellow Dragon Immortal. He was not as powerful as top figures like Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi. If Lin Sun deduced further, he could tell that Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi's Tao Karma should be ranked in the top 500. As Lin Sun pondered, he immediately stepped forward and a circle of sword-shaped ripples emerged like dreamy moonlight. Boom! Heng Xiao's fist, which seemed to be able to burn the heavens and the earth, was easily shattered and turned into a colorful rain of light. Before Heng Xiao could change his move, the sword-shaped ripples spread and destroyed his thousands of feet tall figure. It was as if a sword had cut a 1,000 feet tall mountain. The rain of light scattered and disappeared. As Lin Sun expected, after this overly easy Great Path competition, the Chaos Tao fruit did not appear. However, The number of Tao karma distributed in the heavenly cycle Tao law had decreased by 1. There were only 1613 of them. Lin Sun was not disappointed. Instead, he was a little interested. Since ancient times, all the cultivators who had left the mortal transformation realm had left behind their Tao karma in the heavenly cycle. But even after so many years, the number of Tao karma in the heavenly cycle was only slightly more than 1600. Of course, there must have been people like Xia Ji in the past who defeated the Tao karma manifestation and replaced it. However, compared to the tens of thousands of powerful figures scattered in the mortal transformation, the number of heavenly cycle Tao laws was still too small. This showed how cruel the Great Path competition was. However, this was not what Lin Sun was interested in. He suddenly realized a problem. For instance, his master, the master of the core dimension, Golden Cicada, Chen Linkong, the absolute beginning ruler, and many other terrifying existences who had entered the profound God domain, how could they not have left behind their own Tao karma in the mortal transformation realm? Then where was their Tao karma characteristics, and what was their ranking amongst the universe Tao laws? If I can find their karmic Tao images and fight them one by one, I might be able to find out how strong they were back in the mortal transcendent realm. Thinking of this, Lin suddenly felt a strong impulse in his heart. Just do it. All those years ago, they were in a similar situation as he was now. So a battle with their Tao characteristics was undoubtedly a different type of competition for the Grand Tao. At this point, Lin Sun was no longer in a rush to leave the mortal transcendent realm. After a while, Lin Sun came to the east gate of the imperial capital. A towering ancient tree was rooted here. The tree's bark was like the skin of an old dragon, and it was hard like divine iron. Its branches were like blades and were suffused with a ghastly and murderous aura. This was also a Tao karma characteristic. Looking at this ancient tree, Lin Sun recalled the scenes he had seen in the various cities of the Qin kingdom a few days ago. There are too many heavenly Tao laws in this world. If I can control all the other heavenly Tao laws with one rule, then I can make the billions of people in the 49 countries follow the same teachings. In this way, perhaps there will be no more chaotic, complicated, and bloody conflicts in this world. Lin Sun muttered to himself. There were more than 1,000 heavenly Tao laws distributed in the 49 countries, affecting billions of people in countless cities. But because of this, there were many contradictions and conflicts among the people in the world, just like the collision between different civilizations. But if one Tao law could be the main Tao law and the other Tao laws could be supplementary, then no matter how many Tao laws appeared in the mortal transcendent realm in the future, they would be controlled and restrained. In this way, although it was not the great harmony of the world, it could make a big difference. This was the so-called all-embracing, all streams returning to the origin. Thinking of this, Lin Sun could not help but look a little strange. If I can really do this, then the powerful people in the world are educating the people, and I'm afraid I'm educating the powerful people in the world. Was it possible? Maybe. He would just have to take it one step at a time. The next moment, Lin Sun abandoned all distracting thoughts and looked at the towering ancient tree again. Whoosh, the ancient tree swayed and quietly turned into a black figure. She held a copper mace in each hand, and her long gray hair fluttered in the wind. Her aura was cold and mysterious. Nian Dongwei, known as the Transformation God Emperor, she left the mortal transcendent realm 330,000 years ago. Her Tao karma was ranked 417th in the heavenly Tao laws. Boom! The battle broke out. Nian Dongwei held the twin mace in her hands and struck down. Immediately, endless black lightning rolled down, covering the sky and the earth. The destructive aura was shocking. Lin Sun raised his hand and made a stroke. The sword chi burst out and cut across the sky, tearing the sky and the black thunder all over the sky. Bang! Nian Dongyue's figure also seemed to be torn apart. It split into two and disappeared. Now, the mortal transcendent realm had one less heavenly Tao law. My path to the top will begin in the Qin kingdom. Lin Sun took out the Tao Karma Jade archive. It showed the distribution of more than 1,000 Tao Karma Dharma, and these became the goal of Lin Sun's journey. In the following period of time, Lin Sun walked alone, passing through cities and mountains. Every time he came to a place with a Tao Karma Dharma, he would stop and fight with it. Then he swaggered away. His footprints were like a long line, constantly spreading to other places in the mortal transcendent realm. Occasionally, he would stop and meditate, watching the mountains and rivers, watching the people, and comprehending nature. But most of the time, he spent it hurrying along the road and fighting. What was cultivation? Life was everywhere. What his body felt, what his mind experienced, what he saw, and what he experienced in the world were all accumulations and comprehensions. For the current Lin Sun, time was no longer limited, the world was no longer hindered, the world was free to roam, and the Tao was free to gallop. What he wanted was a free and unfettered state of cultivation. As the saying goes, be ambitious, and your heart is wandering. Of course, Lin Sun was completely unaware of the commotion he had stirred up in the mortal transcendent realm as he continued on his journey. A month later, profound God domain, Feiyun world. This was the place where the 9 divisions of Taichu resided. In an enormous hall that stood towering beneath the sky, a low and solemn voice resounded. Everyone, I just received news from the mortal transcendent realm. In the past month, Lin Sun has traveled through 19 countries in the mortal transcendent realm, including the Qing Kingdom, the Yun Kingdom, the Wei Kingdom, and the Banyan Kingdom. Now, he has defeated 533 Tao Karma Dharma. The person who spoke was a young man in a feathered robe and a Taoist crown. His entire body was coiled with a light violet rain, and his Dharma was shocking. Qing Yangzi, the Kuan Division's heavenly mandate realm lord, the boundless realm lord whose cultivation was close to perfection. There were 8 figures seated at other places in the hall. There were men and women, young and old, and every single one of them possessed boundlessly terrifying auras. They seemed like supreme gods. These 8 figures were respectively the heavenly mandate realm lords of the other 8 divisions. Every single one of them possessed monstrous cultivation and great authority. This kid is actually so formidable. So in this way, his cultivation isn't far from the heavenly mandate realm lords like us. The 8 heavenly mandate realm lords couldn't help but be shocked, and they were in an uproar. I don't know exactly how formidable his cultivation is. All I know now is that amongst the 533 Tao Karma Dharma he defeated, the strongest one is ranked at the 93rd rank of the universe Tao law. When he spoke up to hear, Qing Yangzi gazed at a gold-robed old man. Brother Yuan that's probably the Tao Karma Dharma he left behind all those years ago, right? Everyone was shocked in their hearts. The gold-robed old man was called Ming He, and he was the Sun clan's Tao Lord of Destiny, and he possessed unfathomable resources and reserves. Back then, the Tao Karma I left behind in the mortal transformation realm was ranked at the bottom, but there was still a huge gap between me and the boundless Taoist Lord back then. Even if Lin Sun managed to defeat the Tao Karma I left behind, it doesn't prove anything. Ma Ying has said with an indifferent face, among us, the one with the highest ranking in the heavenly cycle law of the mortal transcendent realm was Qian Division's Destiny Tao Lord, Brother Pei Tuesday. He was ranked 21st, and the last was Brother Ku He, who was ranked 93rd. Qing Yangzi said, presently, this kid has swept through 533 karmic Taos in merely a month of time, and even the karmic Taos left behind by Brother Ming, he weren't a match for him. This is sufficient to prove how terrifying this kid's combat strength is. He paused for a moment and continued. Not to mention that in the past, have all of you ever seen someone be formidable to the point of challenging over 500 karmic Tao characteristics, yet still be unable to draw down the chaotic Tao fruit? Everyone's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Qing Yangzi, after saying so much, what exactly do you want? Someone asked. Qing Yangzi glanced at the crowd and said, I hope that we can ask Miss to tell her everything about Lin Sun and let her decide what to do next. Everyone was a little hesitant. Was it really worth making such a big fuss over a mere Lin Sun? Someone said in a low voice, No matter how powerful this kid is, he is still in the mortal transcendent realm, and our forces are all distributed in the bound of universe, the ninth heaven, which is beyond our reach. It's better to wait for a while. If he really has the ability to kill his way to the bound of universe in the future, we can mobilize all our forces to deal with him. Qing Yangzi frowned and couldn't help reminding them. Everyone, let's not talk about anything else. When Lin Sun really has the chance to kill his way to the bound of universe, he will obtain at least 8 chaotic Dao fruits. After refining these chaotic Dao fruits, his cultivation is bound to be much stronger than it is now. Isn't it a little too late to deal with him at that time? Speaking of this, Qing Yangzi sighed softly and said, "Well, I'd better go to see Miss and let her decide." At this moment, an old ape with 2 swords on his back suddenly appeared outside the hall. His tall figure blocked the door, giving people great pressure. Ape Ancestor. Suddenly, the 9 Masters of Destiny Path stood up and showed awe. Miss has been kept by Hierarch's side. It's up to you to decide what to do in the future. Ape Ancestor said in an old voice. He didn't walk in the hall, nor did he mean to stay any longer. After saying such a sentence, he turned around and left. Chapter 32:45. The Ape Ancestor came quickly and left even faster. The 9 Destiny Path Lords all had different expressions on their faces. Miss was left by the Sect Master's side. Did the Sect Master already have a chance to escape from the swordlock? Qing Yangzi, now you've seen it as well. It's already impossible for the young Miss to give us any more orders. In my opinion, you still have to keep your composure. Someone said softly. But I can't wait any longer. Qing Yangzi heaved a long sigh, then turned around and left. In my opinion, Qing Yangzi's worries shouldn't be underestimated. Lin Sun is seen as an unprecedented variable. It's undoubtedly the safest way to get him under our control as soon as possible. The golden-robed old man, Peng He, said in a deep voice. Peng He, the Sun tribe's forces are distributed in the dark world of the third heaven. If Lin Sun really has the ability to enter, we can assassinate him. Someone suggested. The dark world, the third heaven of the spirit's realm. It was a turbid world that couldn't be sensed. Everywhere was shrouded in mist and murderous aura. Even a boundless realm cultivator couldn't detect it with his divine sense. It was the strangest and most dangerous place. That depends on whether Lin Sun can reach the dark world alive. Peng He said softly. Lin Sun was still walking in the mortal transformation. Even if he left the mortal transformation, he had to kill his way out of the calamity realm of the second heaven. By the time he reached this step, who knew how long it would be? Time flew, and another 2 months had passed. The mortal transformation. On a vast river, Lin Sun steered a skiff and drifted on it. He drank wine as he looked at the Tao Karma Jade archive in his hand. Calculating the time, it had already been 3 months since he began his journey in the mortal transcendent realm. In these 3 months, he could cover almost all of the 49 countries in the mortal transformation. Most of the Tao Karma images he encountered along the way were defeated. Only a dozen or so Tao Karma images were left by Lin Sun. The reason he didn't compete with these 10+ karmic Tao images was because the auras of these karmic Tao images far surpassed the others and were extremely formidable. Almost all of them were left behind by terrifying existences ranked in the top 20 of the heavenly cycle Tao laws. For example, the one left behind by Lin Sun's master, the master of the heart dimension, was a Tao stele with a picture of the slanting moon and 3 stars. Lin Sun couldn't help being shocked when he learned about this. But later on, he'd asked around and found out that regardless of whether it was the sovereign of absolute beginning, the mysterious swordsman, or Chun Shi, all of them hadn't left behind their Tao karmic images. It seemed like the Grand Tao was nameless. Because of this, Lin Sun was in a low mood. His master, the master of the square inch, appeared to be the first in the heavenly cycle Tao laws. However, compared to the beginning Chun Shi and that swordsman, he seemed to be slightly inferior. Later, Lin Sun saw the Taoism form left by Golden Cicada. It was a lifelike golden cicada, lying on an auspicious cloud and looking up at the sky. Then, Lin Sun learned that Golden Cicada's Dharma of Karma was also ranked first among the heavenly cycle laws of the mortal transformation. Then, Lin Sun saw the Dharma of Black Crow, ape ancestor, and Chen Linkong, the first servant of Tai Chu, who also ranked first. In other words, the master of the core dimension, Golden Cicada, Chen Linkong, Black Crow, and the ape ancestor were tied for first place. These incredible scenes made Lin Sun feel incredulous. Under what sort of circumstances would allow the five supreme existences to be neck and neck in the struggle for supremacy? Lin Sun couldn't figure it out. After that, he saw the Dharma of the patriarchs of the Yuan sect, Spirit sect, Voodoo sect, and Zen sect. All of them ranked in the top 10. Apart from them, there were some unfamiliar names, such as the Nine-Leaf Demon Ancestor, Di Qing, and Heaven-Breaking Lu. All of them ranked in the top 20. However, Lin Sun discovered something shocking. Starting from the 11th ranked Nine-Leaf Demon Ancestor to the 20th ranked Heaven-Breaking Lu, the Dharma of Karma they left behind was filled with the aura of death. This meant that the terrifying existences ranked 11th to 20th, from the Nine-Leaf Demon Ancestor to Heaven-Breaking Lu, had all fallen. How on earth did they die? During this period of time, Lin Sun had inquired about this matter from many powerful figures, but most of the answers he received were rumors. Some said that the Nine-Leaf Demon Ancestor and the others had fallen on the path of severing. Some said that because they refused to serve the Absolute Beginning Ruler, they were killed by the Absolute Beginning Ruler in a fit of rage. Some even said that the Nine-Leaf Demon Ancestor and the others had encountered an unfathomable disaster when they were exploring some forbidden secrets in the ruins of Tao. In short, there were many different opinions about this mystery. The only thing that was certain was that the Nine-Leaf Demon Ancestor and the other terrifying existences had fallen a long time ago. It was so long ago that some of the older figures could not recall the specific time. Of course, the reason why Lin Sun did not fight the top-ranked Dharma of Karma was not because he was afraid. Instead, he planned to fight them last. After all, if he attracted the Chaos Tao fruit after the battle, he would have no choice but to leave the mortal transformation realm in advance. How could he fight the other Dharma of Karma? The river that Lin Sun was sailing on was called the Tonga River. It flowed through the Song Nation. There was an extremely powerful Dharma of Karma in the upper reaches of the Tonga River. It was a chain that lay across the Tonga River. The chain was left behind by Pei Tu, the master of the heavenly fate path of the Qin sect. According to the information Lin Sun obtained, Pei Tu's Tao was ranked 21st in the Universe Tao Law. Pei Tu was ranked the highest amongst the 9 masters of the heavenly fate path of the 9 divisions. The Dharma of the other 8 masters of the heavenly fate path had been defeated by Lin Sun a long time ago. If I'm still unable to attract the Chaos Tao fruit after the battle with Pei Tu, then I'll fight the Dharma of Karma left behind by the 4 great ancestral courts. Lin Sun thought. Lin Sun did not intend to fight the Dharma of Karma left behind by the great figures like the Nine-Leaf Demon Ancestor, the Duan Tian Lu. After all, the Tao energy was the only thing that they had left in the world. It would be a pity if they disappeared just like that. However, even though Lin Sun had defeated numerous Dharma of Karma all along the way, he didn't dare to be arrogant. After all, these Dharma of Karma were left behind a long time ago. They merely represented the cultivation of those great figures when they were in the mortal transformation realm. Now that countless years had passed, those great figures were destined to obtain a lot of Chaos Tao fruits along the way when they were breaking through the 9 heavenly gates. Their current cultivation was destined to be incomparable to that of the past. Moreover, the ranking in the Universe Tao Law of the mortal transformation realm did not affect those great figures' future achievements. Those who were ranked lower did not necessarily mean that their cultivation was not powerful enough. Is that Pei Tu's Dharma of Karma? On the boat, Lin Sun saw a chain that stretched across the river. It was as thick as a bucket and dark and dull. The chain surged with a dark green light. From afar, the iron chain stretched across the river. It was like a natural moat that could block everything in the world. Its aura was extremely heavy and heavy. Many great figures had already gathered on both sides of the Tonggu River. They seemed to have been waiting for a long time. When they saw the boat carrying Lin Sun over, the eyes of these great figures lit up. They had indeed been waiting for a long time here. In the past 3 months, Lin Sun had fought all over the world. He had swept through the world without suffering a single setback. He had already caused a huge uproar in the mortal transformation realm and attracted the attention of countless people. There was no need to think too much. They already knew that Lin Sun would definitely come to the Tonggu River. As expected, Lin Sun had come. Up until now, the number of Dharma of Karma that has been defeated by Lin Sun has already reached 800. The Dharma of Karma that is ranked below the top 100 are no longer in Lin Sun's eyes, someone sighed. Too many things had happened in the past 3 months. It was enough to make it unforgettable for anyone. If it was me who defeated one of the Dharma of Karma, I would probably have attracted the Chaos Tao fruit and entered the heavenly gates. But Lin Sun has yet to attract the Chaos Tao fruit. Compared to him, it really makes one lower their head and sigh at their inferiority. Someone sighed. There were tens of thousands of boundless realm great figures in the mortal transformation realm, but there were very few who could shake those Dharma of Karma. But Lin Sun had swept through 800 Dharma of Karma in a mere 3 months. Compared to him, who could not lower their heads in dejection. Everyone, don't be discouraged. There are only a few people like Lin Sun throughout the countless years. He is destined to be different from us. There were also people who comforted their companions. To all the great figures in the world, Lin Sun was a legend that they could only look up to. They could not even feel jealous of him because the difference between them was too great. Not to mention catching up, they could not even get close to him. Amidst the discussions, the great figures on both sides of the river were paying attention to Lin Sun's movements. Everyone knew that an unparalleled battle was about to unfold. At the same time, Lin Sun also noticed the great figures on both sides of the river. However, he was already used to such a scene. In the past few days, wherever he appeared, there would be spectators waiting at the side. Lin Sun put away the wine pot and dusted off his clothes. When he looked at the metal chain again, his entire aura had quietly changed. Whoosh! Suddenly, the thick, pitch-black metal chain shook and surged with a thick and majestic Tao light. Then, it turned into a tall man dressed in a navy blue robe. He stood on a black sun, and a black divine chain formed from the power of rules appeared in front of him. It was like a black python swimming around, and his power shook the heavens and the earth. Pei 2. The Qian Division's Destiny Tao Lord had left the mortal transformation realm 290,000 years ago. At that time, his Tao Karma was ranked 21st on the heavenly cycle Tao law. The entire place was silent. All the great figures' attention was drawn to him. The battle was about to begin. Feeling the power emanating from Pei 2, Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. This guy was very strong. He was stronger than Qi Qianji and Tian Xingzi. He was the strongest opponent Lin Sun had fought in the past 3 months. Chapter 3246. Although Pei 2 was strong, the pressure he brought to Lin Sun wasn't that great. I could decide the outcome of the battle with one all-out blow. However, it's better to take a look at this guy's background. If we meet again in the future, it'll come in handy. Lin Sun murmured in his heart. Clatter, the long black chain in Pei 2's hand danced wildly, setting off a black storm all over the sky and striking at Lin Sun. Lin Sun raised a wave of sword chi and fought fiercely. Boom! The battle between the two of them above the Tonggu River attracted the attention of all the Almighties present. 10 moves, 100 moves, 300 moves. As time went by, the battle became more and more intense, causing a burst of exclamations in the field. But some powerful figures were very calm. They had seen Lin Sun fight many times and could roughly judge that Lin Sun wasn't using his full strength at this moment. He was contending with Pei 2's Tao power. His purpose was very simple, to explore Pei 2's Tao power. As expected, when the battle reached 800 moves, a sword chi suddenly swept out from Lin Sun's body and slashed in the void. Puff! Pei-Tu's figure was smashed into nothingness. He won again. People were startled, their emotions complicated and subtle. The Tao fruit of chaos hasn't appeared yet. Some people also noticed that after defeating Pei-Tu's Tao power, Lin Sun still hadn't attracted the Tao fruit of chaos. Everyone couldn't help but be shocked. Lin Sun didn't pay attention to this. The Tao power that defeated Pei-Tu was within his expectation. He planned to leave and recuperate for a period of time before going to compete with the top 10 characters. Fellow Taoist Lin, may I know which great figure's karmic Tao image you're going to fight next? Seeing that Lin Sun was about to leave, someone dared to ask. Heaven Wizard. Lin Sun left the name and swaggered away. Heaven Wizard. Everyone present was shocked, and they gasped without end. Pei-Tu's Tao power was ranked 21st in the Universal Tao laws, and Heaven Wizard's Tao power was ranked 9th. From the gap in the rankings, it could be seen how terrifying the Tao power left by Heaven Wizard was. It was destined to be incomparable to Pei-Tu's day. All the great figures present here were clearly aware that the current Heaven Shaman was a true boundless Tao Lord, and he'd slaughtered his way into the profound God domain a very long time ago. Although Pei-Tu was also the boundless Tao Lord, he was still lacking when compared to Heaven Shaman. Come, let's go to the Zhou Nation's Thousand Bird Mountain. The Heavenly Wizard's karmic Dharma form is on this mountain. Immediately, someone left in a hurry. On the same day, the news that Lin Sun was going to fight against the Heaven Shaman's karmic Dharma idol spread throughout the mortal transcendent realm. In a deep mountain, Lin Sun sat on the ground and meditated to feel his own qi. In these 3 months of time, he'd fought over 800 times, and every single opponent he faced was a great figure that had stepped onto an eternal path towards the Tao. All of their paths towards the Tao were different, yet all of them had their own profundities. Winning or losing was not the most important thing for Lin Sun to see so many incredible supreme Taoists when he fought with them. This also brought him a lot of inspiration, and many comprehensions were born in his heart. Now, Lin Sun was sorting out the inspiration and comprehension he'd accumulated during this period of time. As time passed, a supreme path towards the Tao gradually emerged on Lin Sun's body. Vigorous, violent, domineering, and ostentatious, it displayed endless profundities. This was the path towards the Tao that Hung Qiu, the owner of the bronze cauldron in front of the Taoist temple in the Qing Kingdom's capital, sought. If such a scene were to be seen by others, they would probably be frightened to death. After all, the path of a boundless realm existence was extremely difficult and mysterious. Other than him, no one else could see through its profundities. But now, the path that belonged to Hung Qiu had been deduced by Lin Sun. Not long after, Lin Sun's qi suddenly changed, and a new supreme path towards the Tao appeared, replacing Hung Qiu's path towards the Tao. This new path towards the Tao was filled with lively and seething vitality. It seemed to be evergreen, embracing yin and yang, and it had an endless profundities. This was the path towards the Tao of the owner of the ancient tree before the eastern gate of the Qing Kingdom's imperial palace, Niandongwe. After that, numerous supreme paths towards the Tao surged into appearance on Lin Sun in the following period of time, and the profundities contained within them were deduced and revealed by his own qi. These scenes seemed to be extremely inconceivable, and if news of it were to spread, it would definitely shock the surroundings and cause the world to be stirred. It was even to the extent that those at the same cultivation realm as him would be terrified. After all, Lin Sun had merely fought with those Tao manifestations, yet he seemed to have seen through the core essence of their paths towards the Tao, and he'd grasped and deduced them one by one. How terrifying was this? This was the profundity of the profundities of rebirth after they'd transformed to such a state. It could transform the profundities of a myriad of Taos into one's heart, and it could develop the principles of the world into the Tao. It was also in the mortal transformation dimension that Lin Sun had unearthed a taboo like the profundities of rebirth, and it allowed him to see through his opponent's Taos before fusing them into his own Taos and deducing them. Of course, The precondition was that he had to defeat his opponents first. After an entire month, Lin Sun's aura changed, and he deduced the path of Pei Tu, the master of destiny path of the Qian tribe. In the end, accompanied by a burst of rumbling, Lin Sun's qi gradually became gloomy and silent. At this point, the profundities of more than 800 eternal Daos had all been fused into Lin Sun's Dao. Extract the essence, discard the dregs, and finally fuse them together. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun felt that his cultivation had improved greatly, and his strength was no longer comparable to when he'd just entered the mortal transformation dimension. Calculating the time carefully, it had only been a little more than 4 months since he'd arrived in the mortal transformation dimension. Although I didn't attract the chaotic Dao fruit, to be able to obtain so many mysteries of the Dao and the battle of the Dao is already no less than a fortune for me, Lin Sun muttered in his heart. After a while, he stood up, put his hands behind his back, and flashed leisurely into the distance. It was time to compete with the Dao manifestation of the voodoo cult's patriarch. 2 days later, Zhou Country, Thousand Birds Mountain. This mountain was named after the shape of 1,000 birds spreading their wings in the sky, and it was a first-class historical site in Zhou Country. At the peak of Thousand Birds Mountain, there was a white bone altar that was 9 feet high. It was chiseled with ancient fiend god totems, and it emitted a desolate, chaotic, and destructive aura. This was the Dao manifestation of the voodoo cult's patriarch, Heaven Witchcraft. When Lin Sun's figure appeared out of thin air, he saw that countless powerful figures had already gathered in the area near Thousand Birds Mountain. Obviously, they had been waiting here for a long time. At this moment, all eyes were gathered on Lin Sun, as if they'd seen a peerless legend arrive here. Lin Sun didn't care about this. He looked at the altar made of white bones. Boom! The white bone altar suddenly rumbled, and a tall and mighty figure appeared. He wore a beast robe, and his hair was like a halberd. Obscure and rough totem light emerged on his skin. Standing there casually, he seemed like a supreme fiend god that had suppressed the ancient wilderness. Heaven Witchcraft. The voodoo cult's patriarch was ranked 9th in the heavenly cycle Dao law. In the ruins of Dao, he was a top existence that was formidable to the point that everyone in the world knew about it. Although it was merely the energy of Dao that he'd left in this world all those years ago, the aura it emitted still caused all the nearby powerful figures to feel suffocated and tremble in their hearts. Go! As soon as Heaven Shaman appeared, he waved his fingers like a fan in the void. Boom! The heavens and the earth seemed to have returned to the primordial times. The heavens and the earth were in chaos, and everything was in turmoil. Fiend gods soared through the sky, roared in the starry sky, and shattered the sun and moon. Ferocious birds descended to the world, and their wings covered an area of 80,000 kilometers, causing mountains and rivers to collapse. The scenes of turmoil revealed an aura of destruction. This was the path of Heaven Shaman. He rose in turmoil, attained Dao in chaos, and attained eternity in destruction. At this moment, such a chaotic world emerged like a primordial world, and it was like a supreme curtain of the heaven Dao was pressing down, and it was terrifying to an unimaginable extent. Lin Sun's sleeves fluttered as he flashed into the primordial world of the heaven Dao. At that instant, it seemed as if a ruler was holding down the fort, and the chaotic primordial world returned to calm. The mountains and rivers were clear, auspicious clouds flowed, and all things flourished. Fiend gods roared in the starry sky, but they dissipated in front of Lin Sun, and then they bowed in worship. Ferocious birds soared through the sky, but they transformed into docile birds that danced around Lin Sun and cried cheerfully. The entire primordial world suddenly revealed a peaceful and tranquil scene. After that, Lin Sun flicked his sleeves, and with a rumble, the entire primordial world of the heaven Dao transformed into a ray of light that dissipated between his fingers. The spectators in the distance were dumbfounded and shocked. The attack of Heaven Shaman deduced how terrifying the great Dao rules were, and its aura of destruction was world-shocking. It was sufficient to easily suppress most boundless realm existences in this world. But such an attack was casually resolved by Lin's son, and it dissipated between his fingers. This is a supreme battle of the great Tao, just like the collision between the Tao laws of the universe. The strength of every move is like the might of the heaven Tao, and it's indescribable. Someone spoke with a trembling voice, and he was unable to restrain himself with excitement. Rise! Under the sky, the mighty and lofty figure of Heaven Shaman raised his hands, and an expanse of the source of destruction surged out. For a time, violent winds blew, lightning raged, and doomsday-like calamities surged out like a rainstorm. The scene of God's weeping blood faintly appeared, and all living beings transformed into a sea of blood that covered the ground amidst the destruction. All the mighty figures in the nearby area retreated in horror and fled far away. Lin's son raised his brows and stretched out his hand to grab. Swoosh! A ray of light appeared abruptly like the edge of a sword. After that, all the phenomena formed from the source of destruction seemed like a canvas that had been torn apart, and they were easily torn through the sky and dispersed like rain. Rumble! Heaven Shaman stepped on the sky and charged over while utilizing his Tao. On the other hand, Lin's son didn't hold back any longer, and he fought head-on with his own Tao. In the heavens and the earth, Heaven Shaman was like a god of destruction. Every single move he made reflected the phenomena of the heavens collapsing and the earth sinking, all living things being crushed and the world withering away. That level of strength caused people to be extremely horrified from afar. But all of this was completely resolved by Lin's son. His movements were simple and clean. He either slashed out with his sword, stabbed out with his finger, slapped out with his palm, or smashed out with his fist. But every single strike contained boundless profundities contained within it, and it faintly revealed a divine charm that suppressed the past, present, and future. It was extremely simple and unparalleled,